We are live and this meeting is being recorded.
We are live and this meeting is being recorded.
I was going to say, and in conclusion, just kidding, having technical difficulties. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. I am Chair Chris Harding, and thrilled to be here with our first full commission meeting. Now that Commissioner Wilson has been sworn in, and Commissioner Dillabata and I were both sworn in last time, so thrilled to be here today. Call to order, recognizing a quorum of the commissioners. I call the June 11th, 2026 meeting of the Cannabis Control Commission to order. This meeting is being held remote pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025 and is being recorded. Commissioners Dillabata, Wilson, and myself are participating in today's meeting. All votes taken today will be by roll call. We have a full agenda today, and I will generally summarize. We will start with opening comments from the commissioners, really an opportunity for them to introduce themselves and also talk about some of their priorities, the things that are most important to them as we embark on this journey together. Followed by the executive director and commission staff report before we proceed to staff license recommendation. There's one change of ownership recommendation. There are 22 license renewal recommendations. And there are 3 items under commission discussion and votes. The introduction to Chapter 65 of the Acts of 2026 regulatory package, delegation of license renewals, and a review of the approved board motions from March to April 2026. And in that regard, there were a lot of motions that were made in the final few months. Staff had recommended that we take a look at those. So I know there were at least several that we will open up for conversation. All right. So I'll ask the commissioners individually to again introduce themselves and talk about just a little about their background and also talk about their priorities as we embark. And I will turn to Commissioner Dillabata first. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone who's tuning in, all of our team that's here. To Maya Dillabata, I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you today. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to start off by saying major thanks to the team. It has been, what is this, week 3, right? Week 3, but it feels like month 5 in a very good way. And it has been a remarkable 3 weeks, the level of onboarding, just the level of knowledge and expertise that is here in the mission is remarkable. So I do want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to Travis, our executive director as well, and all of the leadership with that, because there's an incredible amount of work that has been done to date and so much more that we will continue. And it truly is because of the talent and expertise that's here. So thank you all to every single function and every single team. So with that, there are a few things that have risen to the top for me as some priorities. And I'll go through them briefly. So the first one, as I continue to set myself in the role of really looking at all the aspects of the commission, one of the things that really stands out is includes supporting thoughtful and equitable implementation of social consumption in Massachusetts. So as this is segmented in the industry, and as it develops, we have this opportunity to build this framework that expands access and economic opportunity without creating these additional barriers for communities and entrepreneurs who have been historically disproportionately harmed by the cannabis prohibition and enforcement. So I'm also really interested in strengthening our social equity programming beyond the pre-licensure stage. Obtaining a license is only the beginning. When we're thinking about this from a business development perspective, these really I'm thinking about the sustainable infrastructure, technical systems, that we need in that space, and then also just municipal engagement. So again, thinking about the approach on how we connect our municipalities with various communities, really strengthening that and serving as a strong thought partner in this industry as we continue to evolve and be on this journey together. And I really am part of a lot of my focus is really ensuring that we as an agency believe in walk the walk, that social equity, social justice, responsible regulation, and economic growth can and must move forward together in the work that we do. So excited to continue this work together. I'll pass back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Wonderful. I'm glad you've been able to ramp, and the staff has been terrific. So thank you for calling that out. Commissioner Wilson, your first official, having been sworn in. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just, as this is my first official meeting, take a moment to thank the governor for the appointment. All of our sort of CVs have been in the public domain for a few weeks now, so I'll just sort of comment on my experience working with licensees and operators from a legal perspective for the last few years, and having the opportunity to bring that experience here, I find very gratifying. In the last 2 weeks since my appointment, I've been very impressed with the quality of the staff. I know that many in the industry have concerns about the commission and some frustrations, but I can tell you that the staff is very aware of some of the concerns of the industry, has been working through some of those issues internally, and many of the issues that have been raised to me personally by various operators. So the commission, particularly from the staff level, is very aware of these issues, has been thinking about them, and I would say have a level of expertise that maybe hasn't been fully shown in the previous years. And I'm confident that the public will see some of these things being addressed in the upcoming year and going further. With regard to my own priorities, I want to focus on regulations that do two things. One is to support the health of this industry, as well as items that protect the public health and safety of consumers and operators here in the state of Massachusetts. This means products that are safe and well tested. It also means keeping this product out of the hands of minors. And it means a strong market that consumers can trust. For too long, this business has been treated as if it shouldn't exist. But this is a legal industry in the state of Massachusetts, as approved by more than 60% of voters. I intend to treat it that way. We have a priorities document where each of the commissioners have identified areas that they're interested in, which we'll discuss later in this meeting. I'll pull out two things in terms of direct focus areas. Inversion, which is something of concern to operators. For those who don't know, this is the potential illegal importation of out-of-state cannabis products, as well as testing and sort of firming up the testing environment here in the states. We can trust what's labeled on our products. Finally, I believe that the best policies come from listening. I'm here to listen to as many people as possible, from operators, consumers, and members of the general public. Please feel free to reach out to me, or I'm going to speak for I'm assuming all the commissioners with your thoughts, concerns, or things. We want to adjust that and make the best policy we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Very helpful and thrilled to have you on board. A little bit of a reintroduction from Chris Harding. Actually, yesterday was 3 weeks, so I had a couple more days than some of the other folks. Thrilled to be here. Like Commissioner Delawada, I'd love to thank staff. Everyone's been terrific, really wonderful to engage with. No one is short of opinion. Really appreciate because it's in sharing those opinions and the constructive dialogue that we get to a better place. So really appreciate that. It has been like drinking out of a fire hose, without a doubt. There are so many aspects, and I think I had mentioned last time, I had been involved at the beginning of setting this up from my perch at Department of Revenue back in 16, 17, 18, 19, but boy, a lot has changed, and I'm coming up to speed on that, which is exciting. So priorities for me. I talked about one, engaging staff, really trying to learn, first of all, who the staff are internally, understanding staff priorities. Again, people have been very good about that and sharing organizational challenges and strengths so that we can think about what is the best path going forward, which then leads to org design, which working very closely with Executive Director Travis Ahern. And we will be doing that together, the two of us, and really taking a step back. It's times of change like this that present an opportunity to say, are there things we can do differently or better? This internally in the agency, but this is critically important because the work that we do here internally helps support all the things we do externally. So I think we have a real opportunity there. So the key roles and responsibilities, who's in the chairs today, and identifying any gaps that exist and making sure we can fill those gaps. So number one for me is engaging staff, working with the executive director and understanding how best the position is going forward. Two, and we've heard this from the other commissioners, engaging the stakeholders, critically important. The communities, the businesses, the consumers, the patients, the legislators, and the administration all have a key role to play here. I'm probably leaving some folks out, but those are the ones that come front and center for me. Lest we not forget, Chapter 65 execution, the laws of 2026. A lot to be done there. We'll be hearing more from the executive director. We'll be hearing more from legal on this topic. There's some things that we are on the clock from the minute that the law was signed on April 19th of 2026. Some of these things we only have 60 days to begin to make some serious progress on. So we'll hear more about that. That is a priority for me. Last but not least, you'll probably hear this a lot going forward. The lens that I use in making my recommendations is around what I call SEETS, S-E-E-T-S. So it's safe, equitable, efficient, transparent, and sustainable. And I think you've heard aspects of that from the other commissioners as well. That sustainable one is something I thought a lot about, and I'm trying to learn about myself. I think Commissioner Wilson's very close to many of the businesses that are out there, and we know some have struggled. You know, we last meeting went through a whole bunch of change of ownerships. So we need to understand that. We'll be talking about this a little bit more in the meeting today, but that sustainability is one. You know, when you start a new industry, you kind of go through some of that irrational exuberance and it grows on a curve and then it matures and it settles. Okay, what can we as an agency and we as regulators do to help support the sustainability of this for the medium and long term? So that's kind of my opening. And hopefully I stay consistent on that going forward, but time will tell us. So unless there's any other comments from the commissioners, I am going to turn it over to the executive director for his report. Over to you, Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the time sensitivity of what may appear to be a brief agenda, but has some very significant topics and time-sensitive topics, I am going to cover a few brief high-level updates and then save the listed reports to be taken out of order by the chair for later on, time permitting. And if we are unable to get to those, obviously we'll do the best we can to make sure all that information is available to the public and discussed by the commissioners when appropriate. So I just want to cover a few things kind of generally and then come back later, time permitting. So I just want to highlight one thing, which is the remote meeting function for today. We've already wrestled with it a little bit already. It's very significant as we approach this coming year. So we're using now the town hall platform, which is being used for the first time in this public meeting. We have taken feedback from stakeholders on the previous platform used for remote meetings, especially listening sessions, and the difficulty some folks have had with that functionality going into this year, as we'll talk about later today. A lot of regs and a lot of public hearings and listening sessions to be had this year. We want to make sure that we are prepared to do that. So this public meeting is being used for the first time with the town hall function. And so we are going to continue to work through that process and have that ready to go by the time that we're ready to engage more of the public through what will be the promulgation process of regs that will have a lot of public feedback. Also like to note through the chair as well that while this meeting is being held remote today, for in terms of the public, the chair's intent is to go back to a hybrid meeting schedule in the future to allow public in the room while also streaming live for those to watch remotely. And so that this is a bit of an adjustment just for this first meeting. And so we appreciate obviously and working through the technical issues as well. One other thing I want to note that we found in what is available on the website currently is commissioner assignments that the chair has completed. The chair has assigned commissioners to each of the existing formal working groups which have been discussed in previous iterations of the board, as well as point persons for specific topics. To help conceptualize what this means, the list again is online, but just to give a couple examples. So an example of one of the more timely and expansive working group assignments is for social consumption, which will consolidate to one commissioner, which will be Commissioner De Lobato, on a train that has really been moving with regs that were most recently finalized and is now in the implementation phase and is a major interest in the industry and obviously a ton of work that is going on with our staff right now. So that's just one example. Obviously, the entire list as well. You can see everything. We have it in two iterations, one by category and one by commissioner assignment, so people can look that up. An example of key topics, not necessarily a working group, but the point person that external folks should look to communicate with and see as the point person for the commission. Two topics would be testing and inversion, assigned to Commissioner Wilson. Obviously, inversion, as the commissioner mentioned in his opening remarks, is a bit of an emerging issue and a national topic and one that we're excited to see progress and have Commissioner Wilson be part of. The full list again is more robust, and I want to highlight that it is going to be iterative and will change, but I'll talk about that a little bit more. I just want to talk about how to kind of engage with that internally. This will be a great help for staff to keep work flowing through commissioners who will act as additional subject matter experts. Commissioners with support from staff will be empowered to bring these topics to future public meetings through the chair for full deliberation when appropriate. Externally, this will provide us with an efficient approach for stakeholders to get in touch with a commission point person when the desire is to discuss critical policy questions and advocate for specific policy decisions. The commissioners will work with the appropriate staff and other resources to act as the board subject matter experts in these topics when external stakeholders are looking for the organization to engage on these matters for speaking engagements, collaborative work with other organizations, and so on. As I noted, the list will be iterative and emerging topics will be added by the chair. Ideally, when topics are resolved, they could be also taken off the list and balance the workload for the commissioners with our incredibly broad mission, public health and safety, equity, research, public awareness, and so on. I'll simply note as well, as we get this point person list out to the public, that people should consider that our commissioners come to the organization with a wealth of knowledge, but are also taking on these topics while also diving into mandated deadlines of regulatory reform that we'll be talking about later today. So I ask the public to please allow the commissioners some grace as they get their scheduling and are taking many requests for meetings and those types of things as they get up and running. So want to note that that is something that I think will be incredibly helpful for efficiency as we move forward and is on the website, is on the packet for today, public facing. Just wanted to note as well, we don't have time for this today, and honestly, I got in at late last night. So one of the things that I'll be getting to the commissioners and others is a summary of CANRA highlights. I just came back from working with a number of other jurisdictions on a lot of topics. We did tour as well, the Oklahoma reference lab and some other things that we'll put together all the information on, provide that and have discussions in the future. Really the high level takeaway though is the talk is generally we are all waiting for federal guidance on major changes for both intoxicating hemp and rescheduling. And the expectation right now within the regulation, within our fellow regulators and that space is that we are expecting to have much more guidance from DEA, DOJ, Treasury, and FDA following public hearings at the end of the season. And again, I will be coming back, time permitting, on the items that are listed under the executive director report. I do have some regulatory table setting to discuss the expectations when we get in to an agenda item later, but I will hold that until then. And if the chair is ready, we can switch gears to licensing. And I will follow the chair's lead on getting back to executive director and staff reports at a later time.
Mr. Chair, if I may just before we go to the next
Go
slide.
right ahead, Commissioner.
I'll try to be brief, knowing that we have a packed agenda. And I just want to highlight something that the executive director said around the top years, particularly inversion. This has been something I've heard a lot about from the industry, and there's a manufacturing out there that maybe it's not as high on the list for the commission as many people think it should be. I just want to highlight a piece of news that dropped recently out of Michigan, and I'm actually just going to read here from a complaint issued by the Michigan regulator around an operator that was diverting product into the illegal market. On March 4th, 2026, the CRA, the Michigan regulator, received a complaint from the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission that marijuana products with Michigan metric tags that were discovered in the Massachusetts marijuana producers facility that initiated a complaint on their side. So I just wanted to tell my sort of the industry that maybe listening to this is, you may not be hearing everything, but the commission has been working diligently in the background on a number of issues. Again, things could be better, things can do things faster and more efficiently, but things are working, and the staff here, from what I've seen, is working very hard on a number of things that are priorities for the industry. So I don't want to take too much time. I'll give it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a wonderful call out. I think you've all seen that news and been aware of some of this in the background. But it's also a wonderful indication that different jurisdictions are collaborating. I love to see that. We face similar challenges in different jurisdictions around the United States, and very much look forward to hearing about Canada and what you learned out there. I know you're out there for a few days, Travis. So at the appropriate time, but appreciate you. With that, why don't we move into licensing and staff recommendation? We only have one change of ownership license, so over to.
Thank you very much for having me again, and thank you to the commission's IND team for getting the licensees to revoke today. There's one change of ownership or control application for consideration today. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the commission's review and consideration. Commission staff have reviewed the application for compliance with applicable laws and regulations and are presenting it for the commission's review and vote. The licensee is Yellow House Cannabis LLC. They are seeking a change of ownership and control over one adult use license and are requesting to add 2 individuals.
Commissioners, any questions?
Just a few, I'll try to be quick. So, and thank you for sort of updating the document that went into the package regarding ownership pieces. I want to walk through a couple of things that are a little bit sort of complex. So, we've got individuals and we've also got corporations listed as the ownership. The corporation, Yellow HC owns, I don't have the number, 90% of the business. And the current individual owner owns 53%. I'm assuming through the that LLC. I just wanted to see if that's correct, if they own some pieces that are outside of the LLC's ownership.
Correct, so they own it through the LLC, and my understanding is that they've diluted it over time since the initial application. So that's why the one individual, his ownership has gone down, but the EDI, the entity direct control is still on the 90-some-odd%.
And the 2 new licensees are taking combined 82% of the, and I just wanted to confirm is that now it's listed as 80% of the license, but is that also of the underlying city holding company, or is that?
No, from what they represented, it's from the license itself, not of the holding company.
And last question, just on the holding company. The company and that owner, Alan, is he still going to be part of the license, or is this a full buyout?
No, he's still going to be, I believe, 8% owner, and he's still going to be have some controlling interest.
And I'm sorry, I said last question.
That's
Too far.
what we're here for.
I'm also just curious about, are we looking at the agreements between the parties, or is this all self-reported on the commission report?
They do submit agreements, they have to submit certain agreements. It depends on what kind of agreements there are. So, if there are more complex agreements, we would also consult with the 15. If they are adding entities, then it would go to the 15 piece of financial investigations review. So we do look at documents that they provide, and then they'll provide different agreements. It could be from employment agreements to purchase agreements to just different agreements altogether.
Perfect. And then just more of a comment, as we're thinking about sort of the market and sustaining the cannabis market, what people are buying and selling into these corporations for may also be an indication of where the market is in terms of the number of licenses out there. I know we're looking at license costs and things of that nature. So that also may be helpful information in the aggregate, just to think about the health of the market. So I'm not asking for anything now, but something that the data will be able to understand.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good. Commissioner, any questions?
No, medicine.
All right, I'll seek a motion to approve the change of ownership for the license. So, okay.
Second.
All right, seconded by Commissioner De Lovato, and do a roll call. Aye. For Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
and aye for the chair. So moved. Right. We will move to staff recommendations on license renewals. We are going to vote on these as a group. There are 22 over staff.
There are 19 adult use licenses and 3 medical marijuana establishment licenses being recommended for renewal. Commission staff have reviewed the applications for compliance with applicable laws and regulations and are presenting them for the commission to review.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, roll call.
Aye.
Aye for Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Aye for Commissioner De Lovato. Aye for Chair Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just noting that later on in the agenda, we'll discuss the process of renewals and have a discussion on how you'd like to see that.
Yeah, and looking forward to that because that was very helpful for me as well, describing the criteria for these renewals, which statutorily we're obligated under 3 different criteria. So it's good to know that. It doesn't mean that we only get one lick of the lollipop. If there's something wrong there, we always have the ability to go back and address it as appropriate. So, and that was helpful. So we'll go through that later. All right. Anything else from the licensing team? Thank you, Portia. Terrific. All right, we'll move on to other business. Let's, Commissioner.
I'll just say, I'm just doing the thumbs up, they've done it, sure.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll second that too. Very good staff work, incredibly helpful. There's an awful lot of material, but it's pretty easy to go through. Yeah, yeah, it is. Thank you. Okay, we will move on. We will move on at this point to commission discussion and votes. And I had mentioned before that there are 3 topics. The first we're going to discuss is an introduction to Chapter 65, Acts of the 2026 Regulatory Package. I think I discussed before that we're on the clock on these. So let me do a little quick intro, and then I'm going to hand it over to General Counsel to give us further background, and then we will discuss. So today we'll be discussing a proposed emergency regulation package presented by the legal team. As a new board, we each have our own priorities that we look forward to developing during our time here at the commission. That said, by enacting Chapter 65, the legislature and the governor has set the commission's immediate priorities, and some with only 2 months from the date of enactment to accomplish. Because of this very short time frame set by Chapter 65, our immediate focus must include the items that must be accomplished within 2 months from the date of enactment, specifically the changes to license caps. As a board, we may also wish to focus on the statutory change in legal possession limits from 1 to 2 ounces to adjust conflicting regulations so that the commission may continue to allow sales of up to 2 ounces. If the board moved forward with this emergency regulation round, we would begin addressing all other changes that need to be made to comply with Chapter 65 in the early fall in a regulatory round, with staff working on these recommendations through the summer months and beyond, and with all regulatory changes made by April 19th, 2027. These amendments include updates to areas such as medical de-vertical integration, advertising, accounts receivable, and more. The emergency regulation process would also allow the board to take a holistic review of 2 regulatory areas that are ripe for modernization: the medical program and the testing regulations and protocols. With federal rescheduling efforts underway, as we heard from the executive director, the medical program warrants consideration of reforms that go beyond de-vertical integration. The commission's medical working group has spent considerable time developing recommendations in this area, and the board is well positioned to take up those recommendations this coming fall. The commission's testing regulations and protocols would similarly benefit from a comprehensive review. The commission's testing team has been developing recommendations for updates to the protocol, which have been shared with the ITLs, independent testing labs, for feedback. Chapter 65 also requires the commission to review the testing regulations and protocol every 2 years and to hold a public hearing to receive stakeholder input. This presents a valuable opportunity for this new board to hear directly from the public and consider additional stakeholder feedback from ITLs and other sectors of the industry more broadly, in addition to the recommendations developed by the commission's testing team as part of the next round of regulatory updates. We're all eager to start addressing those changes, and I want to stress for the public that we'll be working on those updates as soon as possible. But we must also comply with the statutory mandates and priorities that Chapter 65 has set for us. With this in mind, we turn to discuss the legal recommendations for an emergency regulatory package. The commission's staff have been working hard to meet this initial 2-month deadline, and today's discussion will move forward. We'll move that work forward. I now turn to our legal team and our general counsel to kick off a discussion on collect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to actually hand it over to our AD, who will do a little table setting for us, and then we'll get into the presentation.
All right, so I think just really kind of from a non-legal perspective, which is the role I'm playing here, is to just do a little bit of table setting on the expectations for what the commissioners are being asked to do today and prior to some deadlines that are coming. So there's 2 main policy making decisions that are looking to be established today. under agenda item Roman numeral 6 sub 1 that the general counsel staff will review with commissioners. The first is, will the board be pursuing emergency regs prior to the 60-day mandate within the recent legislation, which equates to June 19th deadline, given the governor signing on April 19th? Or conversely, will the choice be to open a larger reg package that can be opened but not completed within 60 days? In the former scenario, the emergency regs, to comply with this deadline, the scope of the emergency regs will be very narrow and directed entirely by the legislative mandates for the 60 days, caps being probably the most recognizable item within that list. In a latter scenario of the larger package that's not completed but is open within 60 days, we would open the regular regulatory promulgation round, and the commissioners will be asked to define a limited scope before that June 19th deadline. Both scenarios will require at least 2 regulatory packages to be done this year. So I think folks can expect that we will be doing regs all year. The second policymaking decision that will be discussed today is what is within the scope of that regulatory package, the first regulatory package, whether it's emergency or otherwise. In the emergency reg scenario, the legal team will review what must be included and anything else that will generally need to move to the next package just for the public's knowledge and information. In a full regulatory process scenario, the commissioners will similarly need to define and narrow the scope of what that package will entail so that we can file or we can make the expectation known at the beginning of the promulgation process by that deadline. In summary, as we approach these decisions today, we are looking to follow up with a meeting next Wednesday, the 17th, to come back with motion language and potential approval for the board after some of the policymaking decisions today that you'll go through with the general counsel's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Victor. With that backdrop here, we're going to do a presentation to go through, which will explain and further go into detail on the topics that we need to introduce. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues in the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, General Counsel Chad Paddock. If we could go to the next slide. So as already been set by those spoken before me, we're going to be discussing our regulatory proposals here. And we can go to the next slide. And one further, please. Thank you. So this chapter 65, of course, you're all very familiar with that now. And we know that Governor Healy signed this new law on April 19, 2026. The bill, of course, restructured the commission and set rapid deadlines that are going to require significant planning and resources to implement. The section of Chapter 65 that the legal team is particularly flagging for the board is Section 60. And I'm pointing this out because it sets a very, very tight deadline for the commission to start promulgating regulations. Section 60 states, not later than 2 months after the effective date of this act, the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission shall amend its regulations and begin accepting applications pursuant to Section 16 of Chapter 94G of the general laws as amended by Section 36. And so this is the 2 month deadline. If we could go to the next slide. So in order to promulgate regulatory amendments, there is a typical 30A process, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, that's our Administrative Procedures Act. And there's an emergency regulatory process. And so both of those have already been previewed for you by our executive director, but the important points here are that the typical process would involve the board having policy discussions, staff redlining potential regulatory amendments, those going to public comment and hearing with a 21-day notice period for the public. And then it's the board coming back and making any amendments that are responsive to any public feedback and filing those with the Secretary's office to become effective as law. With emergency regulations, the process is flipped. So what happens is the board would still discuss policy and the team would still present redline amendments for the board's review, but they would be filed with the secretary and immediately upon filing, they would become effective. After they become effective, there's an opportunity for public comment and hearing. We would follow those normal time frames with 21 days of notice. And the board would then have the opportunity to go back and make any changes to those regulations that are in effect, make any adjustments that are necessary. And if those changes are filed within a 3-month period, then the law will remain in effect. If the commission chooses not to move forward with any amendments or to let those regulations lapse, they would automatically expire after a period of 3 months. And we can go to the next slide. So this is the first issue for you as a board to make a determination. Because the board was not named by the governor until May 19th, that leaves us 30 days of the 60 to start moving forward on this promulgation process. And so what the board will need to choose is which process it would like to follow, if it'd like to follow the typical 30-day process, or if it would like to undergo the emergency regulations route. Legal would recommend option B as the emergency route because of the nature and the timeline set by the legislature in statute. And that's certainly for the board's consideration, and we're happy to answer any more questions, but certainly by all means, the board is welcome to discuss that.
Great. Thank you. Any other thoughts from you before we start asking some questions? No? Okay. If it's okay, I'm just going to kick off. So, having done emergency regs in my past when I was commissioner at DOR, I recall the process, but what are the impacts if we don't do emergency regs and we miss the deadline of June 19th? What happens?
Mr. Chair. Well, the statute as Town Council, you know, had gone through section 60 requires that not later than 2 months after the effective date of the act, that the commission should amend its regulations and meetings and applications. I think the spirit of that is met with some sort of action by the board, so whether that's issues of emergency regs or kicking off a regular regulatory round, would satisfy the spirit of the language of the statute. So to your question, the board has an option to make a decision, late year, which means whether to go the emergency route or the regular.
And I get that. I guess what I don't recall is, so if we don't and we miss the June 19th deadline, is there a public flogging? Is there a shame campaign? Is there a financial penalty? I forget. I mean, having been in government in several different roles, deadlines are obviously important, and the governor and the legislature have told us their intent. But I just want to understand, and I think it's good for the board to understand, if we miss, then this may occur.
Sure, and to that question, there's nothing in the statute that outlines any kind of
Penalty.
Penalty.
That's what I'm going at.
So, yes, and just given the fact that the nature of the timeline here and the fact that, you use the new board to fill in more than 30 days into after the bill was signed, so that cut into the 60 days.
Right.
So it really needs you 30 days. So if there's no penalty provision, we don't have to build it into the statute.
Fair enough. Thank you. And again, I was fairly accustomed when things came at us, whether they be state mandates, federal mandates, et cetera, where we had to react. So I'm familiar with the process. Just wanted to make sure that the whole board does. And when would the final regs be filed? So I'm going to connect the dots. They're effective for 3 months. So that's it. We got to go through the whole promulgation process, the hearings, comment period, everything within 3 months. And then we have final regs at that point. Is that correct?
That is correct. Okay. And we have a slide later on breaking out that a little bit.
And then has the CCC ever done emergency regs before?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay, interesting. And again, I've said it a few times, I'm familiar, I've done it. It's a bar you have to get to, which is you've got deadlines and you have to get guidance out there. So I understand. Okay, those are my questions. Commissioners, any other?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation and information thus far. Question, it sounds like the emergency regulatory process from an operations perspective might be a little bit more efficient, right? If we're able to do some of this work in advance that holds public commentary after, right? Versus the normal process, which would kind of create these holding patterns before we get to some of that redlining. Is that, did you understand that correct?
Yes, I mean, that is entirely correct, yeah. This presents an efficient use, an opportunity to efficiently utilize staff resources in a way that satisfies the statutory obligation, it also makes sense operationally.
I might add, it also, we get that out there, we're actually getting real world feedback on those preliminary regs, if you will. So that could be helpful as well. Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, I just want to be clear. So for this policy question, it's only covering the 1 to 2 ounce possession and sale, the license lapse, the ESOP, the employee equity, and the ownership control limits. Those are the ones that we're applying this policy question to.
Yes, I mean, that is correct. Again, we're going to flesh that out here during the course of the presentation. But yes, the statute lays out the section 36 of the statute lays out the particular topics that are subject to that 60-day deadline. And so those are the topics that we are proposing to be completed. Yes.
Perfect. And then, it's you can either do things fast or do things well. We always got to sort of thread that needle. I think as it's been explained, the follow-up based on the emergency process does give us the opportunity to sort of go back and fix things as we hear about them from the public through both the public hearing process after the fact, and we can revisit these regulations in the future. So I'm actually very comfortable with that. And then the last thing to say is, having done this in different places before, kudos to you and your team for having turned this all around after this thing gets passed less than 60 days ago. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, I will just say thank you for that, Commissioner. We have a great team. And it is the team approach, and we can't thank the team enough. Even like this year as a chair, so Deputy General Counsel Mike Baker, Associate General Counsel and your members of our legal team have really shown in this process. And like I said, this is a team effort.
And let's me not forget, not only 60 days, but 30 days or less for all of us. I mean, 30 or 40 day into that time frame. So yeah, tight time frames on this. Appreciate it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, we formally voted on this recommendation.
Yes, and my only question was, did you have more you wanted to go through in the, because I think we know the main categories. I've read the documentation. I don't know if the other commissioners have. I personally am prepared to move to a motion on this, but if there's further discussion or details that the commissioners would like.
My only thought is, again, we've all sort of been prepped on this. Maybe it's more efficient if we voted on it as a package versus we'll do one at a time. But I defer to you, Mr. Chairman, the best way to go with this.
Any thoughts, Commissioner? Like you're going to say.
I would be really interested to go through the information before. And then think about it. That's just.
Your wishes are command. Go for it. Yeah. But if I may, not, I was going to say high level, but more summary, and then we can dive further if we need more detail in each of the categories.
Sure. Okay. And I think we can do that. I'm going to turn it back over to my colleagues here, and we'll do a just kind of an overview of the topics included, and answer any further questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we can move to the next slide, and actually one further after that as well. So just as you, Commissioner Wilson, anticipated, these are exactly the topics that we'll be looking to propose as far as a narrow scope for the possible emergency regulations. So again, the 1 to 2 ounce sale increase for adult use, licensing caps and exclusivity, ESOP trustee carve out of licensed caps, as well as ownership and control limits. If we could go to the next slide. So section 29 of chapter 65 changes the possession limits from 1 ounce up to 1 ounce to up to 2 ounces. So this is fairly straightforward, so I won't read through all of section 29. But our general recommendation from the legal team is to make those reflected changes in our regulations, and that's fairly straightforward.
And then also part of the reason why we're tackling this now is because, excuse me, the former board's motion mandated that staff acted right when the bill was signed. So in order to marry the language between the statute and the regulations, we ought to do it right away. And then kind of to your point, sorry, kind of to your point, Commissioner Wilson, there was a lot of topics that we had considered putting into this round, and we wanted to limit it in scope because it really requires further debate from the board. And as you're getting up and going, the time unfortunately just didn't allow for that. So we had entertained for a long time over the 30 days whether to include the deconstruction of the vertical integration of the medical marijuana license. However, because you've never spoken to that publicly and never reviewed the medical working groups work over the past year, we felt that it was best to leave that to the second. Ultimately, it's your decision. That's ultimately why we are proposing this package as such.
Sure, thank you. And if we can move to the next slide, please. So this next slide points out section 36 as well as section 60. This is hitting on the changes to license caps as well as a social equity business exclusivity period. So the big changes here are that the legislature and the governor have increased the marijuana retailer license cap from 3 to 6 and has also created a new term, fully integrated medical marijuana treatment center, and created a cap of 3 for those license types. As well as section 60, which creates a exclusivity period where the commission shall not grant a licensee that is not a social equity business more than 5 retail licenses until 12 months after the commission begins accepting applications. And so social equity businesses will be the only eligible applicants to receive the 6 of the total marijuana retail license cap, while others will be limited at 5 until that 12-month period has lapsed. We could go to the next slide. Again, many of these recommendations are very straightforward based upon these changes. So the first is to, of course, increase the number of the retail caps from 3 to 6. Add in that exclusivity period for only social equity businesses for that first year, and revise the medical use regulations to include that new term, fully integrated medical marijuana treatment centers, and replace that language as well as add in that license cap. So again, very straightforward, fairly direct amendments there. If we could go to the next slide. So this next section in section 36 is regarding ESOP trustees. And so this particular section changes particular license cap counting. So this section reads that the limitations of subsection A shall not apply to a person functioning solely as a trustee during or after the sale of a marijuana establishment or a medical marijuana establishment for the purposes of an employee stock ownership plan. So this is a carve out from those retail caps and any of the caps that we have set either through statute or regulation. So somebody that's acting solely as a trustee, that position alone, that position in and of itself will not count towards the license cap. It won't ding the license cap. So we of course would recommend to have similar language, if not mirrored within our regulations, to move forward with that amendment. If we could go to the next slide, please. This next section is pertaining to ownership and control. So again, thinking under who counts towards the license cap. This is another carve out. So a person or entity that possesses a financial interest in the form of a license less than 20% provided, however, that such person or entity does not otherwise have direct or indirect control over the operations of a license. And so what the legislature, we're interpreting that to mean is that a loan holding less than 20% equity interest in a license does not by itself cause you to be somebody who has direct or indirect control over the license. It requires other actions. And so that requires us to go in and make some amendments to some of our defined terms. So we're making a recommendation to redefine owner as somebody who encompasses 20% or greater interest equity for the purposes of license caps, as well as redefining person or entity having direct control and cleaning up that definition of it as well. If we could move to the next slide, please. So now we've reached issue number 2. And so although Chapter 65 provides that the license cap limitations do not apply to persons or entities holding less than 20% equity in a license, the commission is still required under the law, Section 5B4 of 94G, to perform background checks for controlling persons with 10% equity interest or greater. And so I just want to clarify that, of course, if you're holding less than 20% and you have some other means of control, that's going to be dinged for your license. But regardless of that, if you hold 10% or greater, we still have to check your background. And so those two things are conflicting in our statute. If we could go to the next slide. All right, if we could go to the next one as well. Thank you. So this is just listing exactly where in 94G this requirement comes into play. So 5B4 indicates that an individual who will be a controlling person of the proposed marijuana establishment has not been convicted of felony or other generally related felony offenses or involved in the distribution of marijuana to a minor. And the statute defines controlling person to be an officer, board member, or other individual who has a financial or voting interest of 10% or greater in a marijuana establishment. Now, if we could go to the next slide, please. So the commission has actually taken the term controlling person, which was at one point in time defined within our regulations. A former board decided to expand what would be a controlling person. And so essentially what the commission did is take those 3 elements of the defined term controlling person and split them through other terms within our regulations. So officers and board members are reflected in the defined term person or entity having direct control under subsection C, close associates, as well as section D, indicating other types of control. The voting interest element is reflected at subsection B in person or entity having direct control, very clearly where it's listing that they also have a voting interest of 10% or greater and a right to veto. And then this piece, the financial interest piece, which is particularly of interest for this particular conflict for the background checks, that is reflected through the term owner, which is encompassed in person or entity having direct or indirect control. And so that's the 10% piece that we need to update to change to the new 20% piece. But by doing that, we have some other impacts. If we could move to the next slide, please. So this is just a bit of a preview to see a little bit about how these red lines might look. So we would change that defined term owner, meaning an equity holder that possesses 10% equity or more in a marijuana establishment, MTC, or independent testing laboratory, to reflect the 20% equity for that license cap purpose. If we could go to the next slide. This is the defined term person or entity having direct control. And as you see here at subsection A, the suggested red line here is just to clean up that language because owner is defined as the very language that follows it. So it's just to simplify, it's a bit duplicative, but we wanted to show the board that person or entity having direct control would now be encompassing all of those people who have 20% or greater equity interest, plus any other type of control. So what we need to capture now is those 10%ers, what I'm calling for background checks. Any questions so far?
I'm debating when you finish, so I've got about 6 so far. But, just in background, is that just criminal? Are we doing tax? And bear with me, it's my background. I've done a lot of tax backgrounds and you learn a lot, but I didn't know if that was part of what we did in our background checks or not.
So that's a great question. So by statute, we're required to do those criminal background checks. There's also authority given to the commission to examine whether an applicant is suitable. So we also have suitability tables, which include other non-criminal related things, such as, I think there's one related to truthfulness, as well as sex offender registration. I believe there's also professional licensure, if there's ever been any suspension of professional licensure. I don't recall any as far as specifically to tax, but that may be something the board wishes to consider in the future.
Yeah, well, I think about that, 20% of the revenue is going toward tax in this case. I don't believe a single municipality has opted out of the 3%, correct? Nor should they. But I think about what I've come across in my past where you find individuals that hadn't filed a return in 6, 7, 10 years. And I gotta tell you, that's a leading indicator. It tells you. But anyway, for another day. I know we're not doing that. I was just curious. I mean, slow you down.
No, not at all, Mr. Chair. If we could move to the next slide, please. So this is issue number 2 continued. So as I've been discussing, the commission uses the phrase person or entities having direct or indirect control to regulate license caps. And it uses the same term to describe those persons or entities that must be listed on an application for background check purposes. So by amending some of these terms like owner, which is contained within the term person or entity having direct control to reflect the Chapter 65 license cap exception for those persons or entities possessing less than the 20% equity in a license, it creates that tension between these two areas of regulation. Because persons or entities having direct control will no longer holding 10% or greater, or as I'm just calling the 10%ers, we'll need to adopt new language to capture those 10%ers. And so we're proposing using one of our defined terms plus some additional language where we would capture the entire universe of everybody who needs a background check by using the phrase persons or entities having direct or indirect control together with any equity holder possessing an equity interest of 10% or greater. And we've used some similar language in other places in our regulations. If we could go to the next slide. So it will look a little something like this in comparison to the current structure. So the financial interest as the element of controlling person will now be captured by that equity holder possessing a 10% or greater equity interest. And so before I move on to any other IT or licensing considerations, just on kind of these legal implications of Chapter 65, I know, Mr. Chair, you had asked some questions. Are there any other questions before we move on to some of the practical pieces of this?
Commissioners?
Yeah, I have, they're not practical questions. So I'll ask them now. So, at the end of this presentation, I know that we're gonna basically ask for a motion to request that legal come back to us at the next meeting with formal language for us to look at. So this is giving you direction to sort of move in that direction.
Exactly.
Okay. And then I sort of want to not come back to, it's not really a question, but I just want to make a comment. We are in many ways trying to fix something that was broken by the legislature in the language. Essentially, there's a definition for owner. And I just want to go back to why it's important. And we have a fairly big audience watching. It's an in-depth background check. We can do more. There's other areas we can look at, but currently it is an in-depth background check. Takes some time and some work on behalf of applicants to get it done. And unless I'm and I could be mistaken, the intent of the legislature was to apply that to fewer people. That's hence the 20% increase. But by not changing the definition in the other section, we're still going to a lot of other 10%ers. And we may have to go back to the legislature at some point to ask them if this is their intent, and if it's so, then to change control person to 20% as well. That's not something we can do here through our regulations. We're trying to figure it out and fit within the box that they kind of created. But if I'm sort of wrong in that analysis, tell me.
Oh, so Commissioner Wilson, you're making a great point. So there's the change to license caps that the new statute made for us, which is very clear. If you have less than 20%, it's not counting towards your license cap. But there is exactly that conflict with the defined term controlling persons as far as who needs to get background checked. So what we're proposing because of that conflict there is that essentially everything remains status quo, but for what counts for your license cap. So the only thing that's going to change as far as this particular increase in equity, right now it's 10% across the board. So if you hold 10% equity, you need a background check. It's also counting towards your license cap. If you hold 10% equity post chapter 65, unless you're a controlling person in some other way through being a close associate or a board member or CEO, some other executive, it's not counting towards your license cap, but you still need to get that background check. So because there was already that 10% threshold across the board, essentially what we're doing with this new language is keeping that threshold. The only exception being is your license cap just isn't getting dinged.
And I have just one more comment, actually more for the audience of the industry that's probably watching, is that these are mandated by the statute. They're not optional changes for us. And I think that's particularly important regarding the change in the licensing caps. There still is some debate or division amongst operators or whether that is good or bad, but the legislature has spoken and made that decision, and we have to implement if we don't get options for these things.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions. This is great. Thank you. And I appreciate going through presentation for each of the sections, each of the issues that we are currently facing, and lots of great work in getting us to this point of clarity. So one of the things that gives me a little pause, and I know, this is a mandate that we need to be able to iron out in a way that makes sense for our industry, and also in the spirit of, feedback as we collectively work towards, the best outcome for the industry and for the public. I'm thinking a lot about that, like that 10%er group. So now that we have 20%, so really 90% or less, of a group that doesn't, this additional 10% that doesn't impact the caps. I have been thinking through the potential negative outcome that we could see when it comes to ownership when this is an actual implementation mode. So what I'm trying to say here is theoretically, someone who is at 19%, right? You're 19% of an equity holder. And because there's no caps, it doesn't impact caps. I could be investing 19% in 20 different enterprises, right? I can, theoretically, someone can do that. So that's a significant amount of capital. Excuse me, it's a significant increase of ownership there without any type of regulation around that. And it gives me, so the reason why that gives me pause is because when I'm looking at this from, from a social equity lens, and I'm thinking about ownership, right? Because I think our industry as a whole, with agents, is very diverse, and we have a lot of people from across the Commonwealth, different communities, different demographics, et cetera, that are part of this industry as a whole, as workers, as managers, and that's great, right? It's an industry that creates a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities, but ownership is something that is really disproportionately there's a big disproportionate gap there. And I worry if we don't, maybe I'm getting ahead of us right now, but if we're not thinking ahead, of the potential implications for the widening of this gap, implicitly, right, not intentionally, but not creating some type of regs around it or some type of bumper that allows us to have clarity on how many people, like who's investing in which enterprise, then we will find ourselves in a situation where that ownership gap is going to continue to widen. So right now, you know, we have very low percentage of Black owned enterprises. Very low percentages of Latino and brown owned enterprises. And I worry if we're not thinking about how to capture that 10% in some way through financial disclosures or something like that, that we do not have the information that we need to say, you know, to really study and analyze the industry to ensure that we remain mission driven from a social equity perspective, and not further disenfranchised from a financial perspective, our Black and brown communities, especially Black and brown owners. And I mean, that's something I want to be able to see as we increase, we're intentional with those decisions, we're intentional on how we show up in the public, and especially on how we write out policy, because this could have negative implications that way. So that's just kind of where I'm thinking right now.
As you should with your chair. And we all know statutorily, a big part of your focus is exactly that, social equity. So you will continue to be our conscience there. It's important. But you know, you brought up something that I want to learn more about, which I don't know that I've seen all the data on the equity side, and you're talking about ownership and percentage. So that could be a good one. But maybe we can table this one for now because I think it is important. It feels more medium term because we've got to deal with the emergency regs right now. But I hear what you're saying. What we do today, we have to deal with tomorrow. But the good news is this getting out there, you know, we would have to go through the formal process of, you know, public comment and hearings, and everything else. So I think we'll gather a lot of good input. That would be my assumption, which is good.
Commissioner, Mr. Shire, you're doing your job for moving us forward.
Yeah.
I promise to be brief.
Oh.
Just on some things to think about, because I definitely agree with the heart of what Commissioner Delgado was saying. But kind of a different perspective is, in many ways, well, the truth is opening any one of these businesses is capital intensive. People need a lot of money. By decreasing these limits, I think there's a strong argument to say that capital can flow more freely in this market, particularly for those who want to start on one. I think we're particularly on the information point. These topics are on who gets the in-depth investigation background check. We are, as licensing just told us, they're still reporting to us who owns this business. And we can dig into that more. Who's got the contracts? So I think we can be smart about sort of how we look at that data. And I could be corrected, but they're reporting to us who owns at each level, so we can verify that you are at or below the that suitability threshold that for the suitability investigation. And then we can tailor some programs around getting the capital, encouraging the capital to go somewhere that increases diversity and us understanding the market broadly to increase those issues. So I don't know if this is necessarily a thing that's going to cause some of these negative effects.
All right, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just briefly in response to that conversation, the wonderful Department of I&E has also let me know that our regulations, as Commissioner Wilson pointed out, it will require that disclosure of anybody 10% or greater for those reasons. And then if that changes, there will still be that necessary change of ownership process where anybody 10% or greater will have to go through that board approval for the change of ownership too. So I wanted to share that because they've flagged that for us here. But moving forward, if we could go to the next slide. So this is particularly pertaining to the license application updates and the infrastructure piece of all of this. So issue number 3 is just how we're going to build out any of these changes into our software program. Many times the build out of the structures that we require for regulatory changes requires significant amount of time for the providers to develop that framework on the back end. And because of some of these difficulties, our wonderful licensing team is even doing some work on hard paper, which, you know, we live in such a digital world. We don't often think about those difficulties. We have been able to speak with the software provider, and there is a recommendation that we would be able to change some of the more simplistic things in the software infrastructure that would allow us to continue forward with this license cap increase and still capturing those 10%ers. And so it can be as simple as updating some of the instructions as well as some of the labeling on the structure that's already built so that it's clear for applicants exactly what needs to be listed, who we're looking for, and the identification of who those people are, that those pieces don't need to change. And so it looks like this is something that's much more straightforward for us to implement practically, which is really very good news. And so we'll be able to move this forward on a shorter term as opposed to some of those bigger software updates we would have to make that would take a longer term. And so if we could go to the next slide. And one more, please. And so this is just an opportunity to allow the board to have any further discussion on any of these issues that we framed. Again, one being any discussion about the process that we use for our regulatory promulgation. Number 2, ensuring that the board, if the board has comfort with how we're capturing those 10%ers. And number 3, if the board would like to move forward with those software changes to make these to actually implement these next steps.
Thank you. If I may, just a couple more questions. The 1 to 2 ounce change, which I know we have. Are other jurisdictions doing that? Do we have any info from what's happening in other places around the country? Is that common practice now? I'm looking at the example.
Mr. Chair, we can certainly put together kind of a full summary, but 1 ounce was putting us on the lower end of other jurisdictions. I think Michigan's 2.5, for example. So going from 1 to 2 puts us in line with what other jurisdictions, other states have. We can put together a full survey.
Got it. And in that same vein, are we seeing similar moves in license caps in other jurisdictions?
Mr. Chair, similarly, every state has taken a different approach, which has led to different outcomes. So, for example, in Michigan, there was a non-cap approach in the beginning, as opposed to Illinois, which was a much more strict cap. And we were able to track over time, and we have a lot of data on kind of the impact of that, not just in the overall market health, but also on equity outcomes, et cetera, that are in different jurisdictions guiding documents. So, in terms of caps, we are again on the spectrum of other jurisdictions across the country, probably middle of the road in terms of starting with 3, now going to 6. But there are states with no caps. There are states with far more strict caps.
What's California? I'm just curious because I know that's the largest single jurisdiction.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Fine.
Pull that together.
No worries. I'm catching you flat-footed, but one other question, ESOPs. I'm thinking that through. It made perfect sense, but I'm like, how often has that happened? I mean, the ledge clearly had something they were going after. I mean, has this been an ongoing issue and a challenge? Are we aware?
So we do have, Mr. Chair, I believe 4 at the last time I checked, businesses in Massachusetts that had gone the ESOP route. There are 280 implications for it, which is a lot of the genesis for it. And, I think that there is demand the legislature saw for folks to potentially go that direction. Whether rescheduling changes that incentive, we will find out. But ultimately, building it in, I think, is important. I think there are other industries that have gone that direction, and we have had interest previously. We've also worked with and can put together some information from Mass CEO, which is a quasi-state agency in Massachusetts, Kevin Kuros, I want to say is their director. We brought him in previously on some of the opportunities in the industry. And I think that we would have an opportunity as well to work with them to create some material specific to cannabis businesses that would be interested in ESOP. So we can roll those out, especially if we see the demand in the industry here for ESOPs.
Cool, thank you. Actually, more than I would have guessed. But north of 700 businesses in total in Commonwealth, 740, 50, I'm still getting up to speed on the numbers, but more than I would have thought. You said a very interesting thing about, we were talking about the less than 20% on ownership, and you said, we believe the intent of the ledge was. Do we ever ask the ledge, give them a call and say, hey, what do you mean by this? Or do we just have to interpret on our own? Because I'm a big believer in clarity. And if we don't know what their intent is, why not ask them?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to respond to that. We have had many conversations with our staff, so we do know, but it's dangerous to take one person's perspective from the legislature because it's the body of many books. So we've had many conversations.
Do you want to add to that, General Counsel? But I get it. I just, you answered my question substantively, which is you were involved in the process, you had conversations, so you believe, but you can't one or two conversations, but it is representative government and they do speak for the body. So we have to take it at that.
I'm not sure I have anything substantive to add.
You always have something. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, those are the only questions I had. I don't know the other commissioners, if you have any other thoughts.
I thought was back to my original comment, when I was talking about the 10%. I just wanted to acknowledge Commissioner Wilson's perspective because I absolutely agree that it would allow the capital to flow in a way that supports our operators. And we already know financially capital is so hard to access. It's very restricted. And for anyone who's an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, micro businesses matter. It takes a lot of funding to stand any of these up. Hundreds and thousands of dollars. So I agree with that. So I think the spirit of where I'm coming from is more so us as a agency, we need to ensure our due diligence of making sure that we're tracking data, that we're working very closely with our departments, because we will be responsible, for widening widening this opportunity gap in the industry, and we can't have that happen. Like I said, Mr. Chair mentioned the data and really wanting to dive into that, being able to look at some of the data sets. It's right now that are public, and I think we will be gathering some more from the various teams to dive into more demographic and very specific numbers. Even just what we have publicly, it's still very low in terms of the representation that we hope to see, or what the mission of the agency was originally set to move this industry forward with. So there's a lot of work to do in that space, and it does require very intentional strategy to make sure that our tactics internally are reflective and beneficial to the public, but also in order for us to do that, we need to read the data, we need to be very closely attuned to the impacts of each of these policies that are going to be moving forward. So we very focus on that as well.
Intentional.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I don't want to belay this because I know we need to get to a motion on these three items. I've been fortunate to found several businesses and raise capital and do other things. It's really interesting when you talk about equity, because I did some where I put capital in. I did others where I got my equity through sweat. So there's a lot of equations in here where we can achieve equity for very diverse populations. Doesn't have to come in the form of capital, but as long as that equity is being achieved, if it's sweat equity, if it's actual cash coming in the door, whatever, I think there's a lot of ways that we can take a look at that, which is great. Again, having done it, there were a few times I didn't have much money, but I was able to find partners that could bring back to the table where I brought my experience and my sweat equity and my passion. So it's a good point. You'll keep us on point on this, which is good. Great. So with that, unless there's further questions, we have three issues in front of us. Why don't we vote on them individually? I think it merits doing so. So on the first, go ahead, Justin.
If I may, based on the conversation here, we have put together some recommended motion language, so if you want to take a look at that,
Even better.
drop that in the chat. And decide if you want to go that direction or not. We have broken these up into two different motions. Second.
The first motion would capture the first two issues and the second one.
And in order to see that, do you need me to log in?
I can see one of them now, going to read it.
Yeah, go right ahead. Thank you.
So I guess I move to direct the legal department to prepare red lines for an emergency regulation package on topics outlined in section 29 and 36 of chapter 65, including the increase in purchase limits from 1 ounce to 2 ounces and definitional changes around ownership, and to bring them to the board for consideration at the June 17, 2026 public meeting.
Good with that. Now, GC, do you want us to move, because I do see both right now. Do you want us to move on one or both at this point, or our discretion?
I would recommend one at a time.
Okay, so Commissioner Wilson just read. Do we have a motion? Second. All in favor? Roll call. Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner Gillivan, and Chair Harding, aye. One is passed. All right, two, and now that I have it in front of me, I'll read this one. Motion to direct the CTIO to begin implementing the changes required by chapter 65 as recommended by the legal department. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All right, roll call. Commissioner Delabato,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Chair Harding, aye. All right. Wonderful. Now, looking at the clock, if amenable, I would move for maybe a 10-minute break. And then we can reconvene and we'll tackle the big one here, but we still have a couple more to go. So if that, do we have a motion to take a break?
So move.
Second.
All right, and we have concurrence. We'll be back on. I'm seeing 11:35. We will be back on at 11:45, 10 minutes. All right, we are officially, I'll turn my mic on. We are officially back. We still have a bunch of stuff to get through, but thank you, everyone. Covered a bunch of meeting topics, very important things, so appreciate everyone here. Moving on to the next topic. It is delegation of license renewals. And I believe I'm going to hear from ED.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that we've highlighted, especially with the desire to try to keep the regular public meetings to a cadence that works for the commissioners, while obviously leaving enough time as well for all of the meetings that we'll have through regulatory promulgation this coming year based on the recent legislation, was one of the items that happened during the transition from the previous board to this board was through the legislation, the ability for the executive director to continue to move certain elements for the industry to keep going during the transition period. Renewals came into that topic, came into that category, right? So renewals licensure follows a sort of methodical list of items that need to be checked off for them to move forward. In certain items or historically, we've had renewals that may have some questions on them, but everything is in order for the renewal to move forward. The renewal gets voted by the board, and then we note that we may be investigating one or two elements and coming back to the board at a later date. So with that, it certainly falls more in the ministerial category than some of the other licensing decisions that go to the board that are more deliberative and intentionally kept specifically to the board. So essentially what's been put forward is a suggestion that the commissioners provide the executive director the ability to approve the renewals and report to the commissioners. And then we've caveated a number of items that would be within that tier relegation as a great example, where a renewal that we may flag with the 70% under the cultivation threshold, that may be coming rather than simply processing the renewal, maybe going through the chair to be put on a future agenda item rather than simply being processed. But ultimately, similar to the two packets that we did review at your first public meeting prior to us being fully situated with the new commissioners, there were two reports of renewals that were done during the in-between period, so to speak. And so that would be basically the process moving forward. If the commissioners are amenable, that the executive director would process those renewals, report to the board at their public meetings. Questions could be answered at any given point. Anything that flags would be put forward through the chair for discussion with the commissioners, and a few specific caveated areas would be held aside if they're not prepared to be done by the executive director because it wouldn't be considered ministerial. So we think from an efficiency standpoint, this will allow you as well to review them in public meeting, obviously, to make sure that you're comfortable, but ultimately not have to necessarily have what we've had in a number of instances in the past, which is we have a licensee that's going to have to close their doors because their renewal is past the allowance of extensions. And so we have to do a public meeting. In this instance, the renewal could be done by the executive director, reported to the board if everything is in order. And therefore you don't have to feel the need to post those public meetings in that instance, but you're also kept up to date, as is the public, on those actions. And again, at any given point, if something is found to be out of order after it was originally presented and found to be meeting the criteria in the regs and statute, then we still have the ability to bring that licensee in front of the board if action is needed. So happy to answer any questions, but obviously that proposal comes as well with a potential motion if the board is amenable to that suggestion.
So a couple of questions. Thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think within some of my opening statements, but there are 3 actions that if they do, we can't stop that renewal process. So one is fill out the application, 2 is pay the fee, and I'm forgetting the third off the top of my head. But of course, if there are any issues, that would be worked by our I&E team. In parallel, they could get their renewal. But again, if there's something found there, that's brought back in front of the board at that point, correct? I'm looking at the general counsel.
Yes. Under the proposal, that's correct, yes.
Okay, and then the other reason that I think it makes a lot of sense is the efficiency as well, rather than slowing things down. As long as we know when issues are identified, it's going to come in front of the board. I think that's the important part from my perspective. And then other questions, commissioners?
First of all, I think this is great. Totally support this. I think it makes common sense. One quick question on it. If they don't pay the fee or they improperly do the renewal, My understanding is that it automatically, their license doesn't get renewed. Will that be in the reporters? Is that come before us to permanently say that this license is no longer active? How does that situation play out?
Administratively, we can do that in a few different ways. We've paused kind of our licensing update here, but on a monthly basis, we provide a full licensing update. So we could report in a number of ways, anybody that may have missed the deadline. And so in certain instances, if we are unable to process the renewal, we most likely are going and working with that business on ensuring that that they're not operating during that period of time. It may be that there's something that still needs to be straightened out. But we would most likely be keeping the board updated in those instances so that you're aware of any actions that we need to take for somebody who was not able to process the renewal. The payment and those types of things are on that checklist that needs to be accomplished for the executive director to process the renewal.
And again, I do want to look pretty good as part of the board copy this. I know that we've got an issue with some licensees and their host community and their host community agreements. How is this, first of all, again, I'm fully in favor of this, but how does this change fit into that context?
So this actual change here of what you'd be requested to sort of authorize the executive director to do and report would not directly overlap with that. What you're referring to and what will also be coming up in front of the board for consideration soon as we approach what will be an end date on previous board actions is currently we are under a 365-day motion that allows the extension of a license should somebody not be able to get us the necessary materials because they do not have a compliant HCA. So rather than allow a host community to use the need of the licensee to have an HCA to renew, we have the ability from a past motion of the board to extend up to 365 days. That is on top of previous motions. So now the aggregate is 965 days because the HCA issue is still unresolved to a certain extent if it dates back prior to before Chapter 180 of the Acts of 2022. So that is a policy decision that will be coming to the board shortly as that 365-day extension that was authorized by the previous board will come up, I believe, at the first time, most likely this fall around the October timeframe. So we'll be having some discussions and policy decisions with the board of how you would like to address what the previous board had taken, which is to allow extensions if HCA is the primary holdup of why somebody can't deliver a compliant HCA to us for the renewal process, so that the licensees continue to operate as they resolve the issue with their host community.
And I promise you, Mr. Chair, last one. Just so it sounds like even under this change, as unique issues may arise for various licensees, or whether it's their host community or something else, we're still going to be kept up to date. If we need to make a policy change over to that, that'll be fully within our purview. So I 100% support this and want to move forward.
Commissioner Gilman?
And at this time, everything sounds good.
All right, with that, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? Right, roll call. Commissioner Gilman?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson and Chair Harding, aye. So moved. Right. The next topic that we wanted to hit was around board actions and motions that we're taking in the final 2 months, March, April timeframe of this year, and provided some information to show what those were. If amenable to the other commissioners, there were several that I thought were worthy of discussing here. And if we can get through those, and then each commissioner, if there are other areas you want to talk about, we can go down that path as well. So the first one I'm going to note was from March 12th. And this reads, the commission approved the motion to direct the executive director and commission staff to develop a draft data use agreement, or DUA, to permit end users to access de-anonymized identified data from the open data platform and to provide the draft DUA to the commission for review and vote within 60 days. So that one jumped out to me a bit. I think everyone knows I have a bit of a tech background, data privacy, having come from HHS, so I'm familiar with privacy and security issues. So this one stood out. I felt it was worthy of a conversation. And I don't know if my fellow commissioners want to discuss this one or if you have any thoughts.
I do, but I'll defer if anyone else wants to say anything.
I really had this one to discuss.
Okay, so Commissioner Dillabato, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, this one jumped out at me as well, as someone who, just with my background being around and working with a lot of sensitive information, both state level, municipal level, and then just, the complexity of our agency and the importance of us as a board, making sure that we are not in situations that create any form of liability because we have access to data or other users have access to data that could put the agency at risk in any type of legal way. That jumped out at me pretty hard. It was a red flag from that perspective.
I had a very
Yeah.
similar reaction.
So to be very frank on this one, I think it's critical for us to reconsider and really talk through this because we are already in a very regulated and very secure environment right now with subject matter expertise in each of these areas. And I think the protection of our data, both for our operators, our licensees, our agents, and just the industry as a whole is critical. So I am currently in favor of reconsidering the specific motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as an attorney, you probably bring a different perspective or maybe similar, but from a different lens. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna encourage, I'm gonna walk through something that I love, General Counsel to jump in and correct me if I'm sort of misstating it. So with a public agency, a majority of the documents that we receive and produce are gonna be public documents. However, because of the nature of our work, there are some things that under the public records law, and open meeting law would be sensitive business information confidential, which are not distributable to the public automatically. But again, so now the other thing, so that's one layer, and the other layer is we always have the inherent authority to work with another agency or perhaps the outside entity around analyzing some of the data, including some of the confidential material. And we would shape an agreement with that entity to protect the individuals whose data we're exposing as well as ourselves. I guess you could say the general public. Tell me if I'm incorrect. Yeah.
Also correct.
So when I look at this, it seems like we've already got the power to do this. It seems to me a little bit rushed, especially considering the time period that was in. I don't think there's really any benefit to our licensees or us to sort of have this motion hanging over the commission. And if the 60-day deadline that it's got, is that coming up this month?
That has passed, I believe. Did it pass already? March, so April, May, that would have been May. Yeah, but with all the changes going on. Yes.
Just add
exactly.
to that note, the DUA was a kind of side motion as well related to some of the information. There is a lot of the information that this motion was relative to that is up on open data right now. And so the DUA was to de-anonymize that data, but the data itself is up. It's just that certain elements of that are anonymized within the open data platform to protect the information that Commissioner Wilson was just outlining. So the information was updated on that timeline. The DUA is the question it sounds like you're discussing.
Okay, well, unless I'm misreading things, I think we're all pretty much aligned. So what I'd like to do is have a motion to reconsider. Do we have a motion? So second and roll call. Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Commissioner Dillabato.
Aye.
And Chair, aye. So with a motion to reconsider, I would also like to propose, or what do we, yes, go ahead. General Counsel.
If I may, just for purpose of the clarity and making sure the record is clear.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw some recommended language here into the chat, just to identify what you're talking about, so that we'll say on maybe know exactly which motion we're talking about and what it is that you're taking action on. So I just looked into that in the chat.
Okay,
And
so
and this would be followed up by a secondary motion after you consider this.
Commissioner, do you have a question? Oh, okay, so I'll read the language here. Motion to reconsider the previously approved motion dated March 12, 2026 involving a data use agreement. Do we have a motion?
So
Second. Second. And roll call.
I,
Obama, Commissioner Wilson. Aye. Chair, aye, so moved. Now, do we have a motion to rescind the motion dated March 12, 2026 involving a data use agreement? Do we have a motion?
so
Second. Second. Roll call. Commissioner Obama.
I,
Commissioner Wilson. Aye. And Chair, aye, so moved. All right. That was the first one that stuck out to me. The second one was from the March 26th meeting of 2026. And I'm going to read that one. The commission approved the motion to direct the executive director and general counsel to develop a proposed policy establishing a clear and consistent threshold for commissioner recusal from licensing decisions, taking into account the rules of necessity and open meeting law quorum requirements, and to review prior instances going back one calendar year in which recusals necessitated delegation of licensing approvals, with findings and recommendations to be presented to the commission within 60 days. This one stuck out to me, and my translation is, and I've watched many of the prior commission meetings, that with all the changes and things that were going on, that this had been thrown in there. And I thought this was definitely worthy of discussion with this group board. So throwing that out there, commissioners, thoughts, ideas? Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, I didn't, so I did see this. I didn't really have any strong thoughts or feelings on it. So I defer to my colleagues. The refusal of policymakers like ourselves, and also under our 30-year context, I thought it's pretty well settled. So, I don't know if this adds or diminishes anything, but I could be missing something. So that's my opinion.
Commissioner Philippa.
this one actually jumped at me as well. There's already a process for us that allows for the proper recusal. We're governed by very strict open meeting law as well, and this, our ethics expectations. So unless general counsel is, unless there's something that general counsel is sharing that if there's a gap in our process that we need to add policy for the future. That's more so where I was thinking, if we need some added layer, or language. What stood out to me was kind of retroactive.
That's exactly
Right,
what stood out to me.
The retroactive aspect of this, I would recommend from like May 19th forward, the moment the new board was appointed. So that's the area that I would ask if, we could get some guidance on what this policy could address in the future from May 19th moving forward. So it would require us to just relook at it, reword things if we need
And
that.
Executive Director, Original Counsel, any thoughts on what the Commissioner said? Either.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do think, obviously, one of the major changes that you're all going to be working through is, with the 3-member board as opposed to the previous 5. When we have a recusal on something, it's going to take some significant work for all of us to make sure that these items are moving forward. So I think that the intent here of getting us having a proposed policy so that you all feel comfortable and clear on when you should recuse and when you may feel optically like you want to identify something, but you ultimately don't hit the threshold for recusal, that you feel comfortable that you're making the right decision. And obviously legal will support you with that. I think we can certainly hit that. In terms of looking back, I'm not sure what the intent of that would necessarily be, or so if we do want to keep that, I think we'd want more clarity. But I think also to Commissioner De La Butto's point, I think ultimately the answer is we want you all to be clear. We want the public to be clear on the expectations for recusal, what the thresholds are, and with a 3-member board is going to be incredibly important that we're all on the same page with that. So I think I agree with the points that were made.
And you're reading from my playbook. That's what I'm thinking, and Commissioner Talbot, the thing, the look back is really hard, especially in light of where we are now with 3 commissioners, et cetera. So, I mean, before we get to a motion, or if we do, right now, my mindset is certainly to reconsider, likely to rescind, but with a homework assignment, which then would say staff go away in light of our new commission, our new 3-person commission. What would you recommend in clarifying policy? Because I agree with Commissioner Delgado. I think the rules are pretty clear out there on things that are appropriate or not appropriate. But if you want to look at that in light of a 3-person versus a 5-person, I think that's very fair. That's kind of where my head's at right now, but I'm open to commissioners feel differently.
That sounds very good to me.
All right. Whoa, wait a second. Are we to a point? How about a motion to reconsider? Do we have, or actually, do you want to give me language? Yeah, of course you do. General counsel.
We'll drop that in the share.
Of course. Right.
Just a minute.
Do attorneys get paid by the word?
Not this one.
Okay. So do we have a motion to reconsider the previously approved motion dated March 26, 2026 regarding recusals and the rule of necessity and the open meeting law? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, and roll call. Commissioner Delgado,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Chair, aye. All right, move to the next motion. Drop that in.
So this one will depend on what it is that you want to accomplish.
Okay. So what I think I just mentioned is I'd like to see a motion to rescind. Well, I'd like to see a motion to rescind. Pick up over assignment. To go away, take a good look at this and inform the board based on this 3-person versus 5-person commission. What do we need to be there?
Give me a moment.
Yeah, no problem.
The projector screen extended itself.
Yes. For those online, you don't know this, all of our screens just went up. That's- Let them see light.
And Mr. Chair, do you want to add, I'll throw this in the chat and you can decide.
Yeah.
Captures.
Making them do this on the fly. Yeah. Okay, do we have a motion to rescind the previously approved motion dated March 26, 2026 regarding recusals and the rule of necessity and the open meeting law, and to direct the legal department to develop a prospective policy for the board for board review and approval? We have a motion.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call. Commissioner Delgado,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Chair, aye, so moved. All right. We'll move on to the next one. Stuck out to me, and it was on April 7th of 2026. The commission approved the motion to direct the executive director to distribute any order to show cause and letter of enforcement intent once issued to the commissioners in a timely manner, subject only to minimal redactions necessary to protect information that is legally confidential or otherwise exempt from disclosure. The executive director shall ensure that any such redactions are narrowly tailored and limited to the specific material required by law to be withheld, and that the substantive basis for the order remains available to the commissioners for their review. Further, the commission directs that this revised process be memorialized in a policy or SOP, with a draft to be prepared and presented for review and approval by the board by April 30, 2026. You got a lot of homework assignments. You did. Anyway, this one stuck out to me on a few levels. But number one for me, I'll start this. As a newbie, 3 weeks and a day in, feels like it could create real liability in the area of investigations and on the role we play as a board when things are brought before us. That stuck out to me, but I'll see what the other commissioners think. And as I mentioned, Commissioner Wilson, as an attorney, I figured you might have some thoughts on this.
I don't want to be able to held to a higher standard.
Yes, you are.
A couple questions for Kajal and maybe anyone I need that may want to jump in. For us, for the people watching, can you explain maybe a little bit about what the order to show cause is, what the letter of enforcement intent is, and where they sit in the enforcement process?
It's usually the high level. And then if we want to bring enforcement counsel up as well, between general counsel and enforcement counsel. So I think generally the only thought on this, and the commissioners are generally aware, is this is a process that I know I had adapted a little bit to the previous two, the former acting chair and the former chair, with requests for information on kind of where enforcement actions were, and the general scheduling is obviously these discussions come to the commissioners in various forms, whether it be a stipulated agreement, whether it be a recommendation for a hearing officer. And so the reason that these two, and the enforcement counsel can answer the specific questions on the difference between each, but each of them have ultimately a level of information that is information that we are presenting to say that we are looking to have a discussion with the licensee because we are generally accusing them of something that they can then defend themselves against, right? And so in that instance, you as adjudicators, the only concern in this area is obviously the information that I'm generally providing, as you've seen as commissioners, is this is where an order to show cause is, or a letter of intent. This is where they are in their ability to engage through the IDR process, to engage the hearing officer, all of which is prior in the 30A process to you as adjudicators. And so some of the information, and the motion does mention it, right, is some of the information should be redacted generally because we do not want to prejudice you as potential adjudicators in that process. So the enforcement counsel or general counsel, just answering the question specifically on the letter of enforcement intent versus the order to show cause, generally both fall in that category. They are being presented to the licensee, but ultimately the licensee has not yet had the opportunity to respond to it at that point in the process.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
thank you all. And so just as a kind of brief description of each of those different tools. So as an enforcement agency, or when you're going through the enforcement process, we have a number of different tools. We'll say that the letter of enforcement intent, order to show cause, those are two of our primary tools here. So an order to show cause is a formal charging document where we are outlining facts and allegations, which then also does allow licensees to request a hearing in order to contest or challenge any of our allegations there. So the order to show cause is a formal document. That process is also outlined in our regulations. A letter of enforcement intent, by contrast, is an informal document. And as the name implies there, it identifies, there's a notice to the licensee that we intend to take an enforcement action. So in general with that, there is not a actual right to a hearing that follows from it. What we are doing with the letter of enforcement intent is inviting the licensee to have a dialogue with us, engage in an informal dispute resolution conference. If that is not successful, then we may proceed to an order to show cause. So that is an informal approach that we can take in some instances. What I'll say generally too is that the agency also has started utilizing letters of warning, which functionally is similar to a letter of enforcement intent, but we, in conversation with some of our sister agencies, I know I spoke with the Enforcement Council and Deputy General Counsel over at the Gaming Commission, just to understand what their process is like. And so a letter of warning is more of a collaborative effort between the investigations team and my team to make sure that we are able to try to address those problems more quickly and expeditiously in the process.
Just two faults and then sort of comment to close my portion out. The letter of intent and the show cause, they're really at the beginning of the process. They may lead to an adjudicatory hearing for this body, or the thing may be resolved before it gets to our level. So those statements are correct.
Yeah, so, Commissioner Wilson, I'll say, so in order to show cause is really the formal initiation of administratory action. So you're correct, it might, proceed through a couple of different paths. One, if we are able to engage successfully in an informal dispute resolution conference and we reach a stipulated agreement, that would come before the commissioners for ratification before that is actually executed. Alternatively, if it goes to through the hearing process, then there would be a hearing officer recommending a decision that the board is also going to consider. If there is no contest or challenge to that order to show cause, theoretically, a licensee could just pay the actual assessment, depending on whatever corrective action, or if there was monetary penalty or anything along those lines, they could pay that, or if they fail to actually submit their hearing request within the time period that is supplied in there. So just in the majority of instances, before a matter is actually formally resolved, it will come before the board for consideration.
And I just see two issues with this particular motion. One is, even though I understand that there's some information being redacted, it's all internal. So in theory, it's not redacted for public records purposes. It's redacted to add some protection around our 30A context. Having said that, it probably wasn't too hard to figure out who it's about, and not saying that it's going to happen on this board, but there can be some pressure from board members talking to a licensee just through the normal course, of maybe weighing in on this when they shouldn't, and they've already got too much information. That's one side of it. On the flip side, we may want to make some policy decisions around enforcement areas or enforcement policy, and we can look at closed investigations, closed enforcement actions to make those policy decisions. So I would really be in favor of taking another look at this and potentially rescinding it.
I agree with both the comments that you have made. And what jumped out at me particularly was having us put in a situation where we are liable. So just having this layer of liability when we have access to information that prevents us from being impartial in various scenarios, and that is what's concerning, especially when we're interfacing with many of our constituents, operators, licensees on the regular basis. And I also just, from my perspective right now, and really learning just the sophistication of our process, like I have all the trust to know that we have our leaders in IME and legal team that inform us of the things that we need to know in order to make sure that we're making the best well-informed decisions when we are presented in various situations. So throughout that process, our investigative and enforcement process. So the liability aspects of having access to this data and not creating any form of partiality, as much as we think that we probably could be, impartial. We're human. So once we see something, it's kind of imprinted in our brain. So I think as much as to really safeguard and then trust the processes that we have with, also, Commissioner Wilson, with your perspective added in on looking at how we can improve any policies. I think every process and every organization there's always room for improvement, especially as our goal is to grow with this operational excellence in mind in every facet of our work. I mean, there's a lot of things that we should always continue to improve and look back on. So if there are any gaps, things that we and also to add, I think because the industry, we will continue to grow. Right? And I'm also just, putting this out there for we want the industry to grow. We want this industry to be successful in so many ways. So with growth, there needs to be very thoughtful, protections and considerations so that we remain, impartial throughout the process.
Well said. So I think we're all pretty aligned on what I'm hearing is rescinding this. My only question, and I'd love to hear both of your perspectives, is there a homework assignment in this? Is there something that we want legal enforcement, et cetera, to consider? I mean, I'm at a point where, again, you heard where I started, where liability was my number one thing, especially in light of now there are three of us. You happen to come across something in normal course of business which creates some sort of a bias. Now we're down to two voting. That, I don't like that. So I definitely have a mind to rescind, but both of your thoughts, is there anything that we would want more information on if we were to rescind this? Any homework assignment? Not that I want to get a lot of homework assignments, but again, it's all in the interest of clarity. Executive Director?
Can I just add some context? So generally speaking, some of the information that we want you to understand and know of where these things are progressing, right? Are they selecting to go through the IDR? Are they selecting to go through the hearing officer? How do we have those things scheduled? When are these things progressing? So you have an expectation. What does the workload look like for pending, for active items going through the hearing officer, going through IDR, which is obviously a ton of time off of our enforcement council staff. So that's the type of general information that we want you to understand. But I guess to your, just to frame part of your question too, are there other things? And we can obviously, as things come up, discuss the appropriateness of them under 30A as well and develop this. This can be iterative, and it's not an attempt to not provide information. It's an attempt to keep you unprejudiced as your 30A rolls.
Yeah.
And so again, I think we have tried to make this, trying to get as much information as possible within those bounds, but obviously open to kind of anything else that the board is looking for.
And I'm not suggesting we need a homework assignment. I'm just asking. Right now, my opinion, I'm in favor of rescission. And if things come up down the road, we can address them at that point. But the liability for me, 3-person versus 5, I just think it creates exposure that we shouldn't have to deal with. So, well, other thoughts, Commissioner?
I don't really think there's any more, but just to sort of round up the discussion, I've already actually started this conversation with the enforcement council and general counsel around a package of regulatory reforms around things that we do enforce that I think may be a little bit unnecessary, which will become forthcoming in future meetings. So I don't think there's anything homework from this.
Okay.
I agree.
So with that said,
Chairman,
I was going to say, general counsel, I knew you would. Shall wait on that. Okay.
This could be a follow-up. I just.
Yep, so the first, motion to reconsider the previously approved motion dated April 7, 2026 regarding distribution of orders to show cause and letters of enforcement intent. Do we have a motion? Second? Second. Roll call. Commissioner Delaval.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Chair, aye. So moved. All right. Now, do we have a motion to rescind the previously approved motion dated April 7, 2026 regarding distribution of orders to show cause and letters of enforcement of intent?
So moved.
Second? Second. Roll call.
Aye.
Commissioner Delaval, Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
and Chair, aye. So moved. All right.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, you may.
Just to circle back on the homework assignment, I do think, Commissioner Wilson's point as well is a very valid one, which is we have the opportunity to walk through and for your own benefits coming in as adjudicators, go through previous enforcement actions that have been closed as examples so that you can see those processes, review them, see for improvements that you'd like to see in processes coming forward. I think that will go both also to what we can do to get everybody prepared, but also to the level of process policy improvements that folks are looking to see.
Very good. Thank you. So moving on, the next one that stood out to me was on April 16th. And I'll read this. The commission approved the motion to direct the executive director to take the necessary steps to establish the testing task force as a standing permanent body of the commission. Permanent testing task force shall include the chief of research or their delegate, the director of data analytics or their designee or delegatee as members in addition to existing composition. Further, the testing task force shall expand its scope to include an examination of cannabis testing yields, including but not limited to dry wet weight for the purpose of identifying and addressing potential instances of fraud. Additionally, the testing task force shall develop and present to the commission within 60 days a standing operating procedure to initiate auditing of ethanol for purpose of detecting inversion or other related anomalies. So I'll start with some of my thoughts. If I'm interpreting this correctly, and I would love general counsel's thoughts, much of this is now the responsibility of the chair, given the way we're structured, working with the commissioners. Specifically, we will have an initiative chaired by Commissioner Wilson around testing. So the idea, it almost feels this is superseded by the new statute, our work track, and this one, Commissioner Wilson making recommendations to the three commissioners, then moving forward. Is that a correct interpretation?
I think that is accurate.
Okay, good. But with that, that was kind of my takeaway on this one. I'd love to hear from the other commissioners. Commissioner Delabon? Oh, Commissioner Wilson? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually very conflicted about this one. First of all, I thought I was ignoring Mr. Chair, you stole my thunder.
Uh-oh, sorry.
But the heart of it, just that we're looking at testing, I think it's something that,
Yeah.
I think we've expressed over up here, it's listed in the document about topics commissioners are going to cover. So the heart of it, I like the directiveness, the 60-day deadline, assigning staff to these particular roles. Those are all things I don't like. So I guess I'm hoping that there's maybe some way we can, for those out there that are watching, there's some way we can reframe this just around that. This will be a focus of the commission and be less directive in terms of staff deadlines. Would be what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Commissioner Delabon?
I appreciate both of your comments on that. I definitely resonate in line with my as well. This was one that surfaced for me as well, going through emotions, and mainly because, I'm thinking budget, I'm thinking another permanent fixture, function of the commission, staffing. We have a process in place. The way that we're structured creates, that focus at the highest level. So it doesn't feel necessary based on how, the physical permanence of an additional function, right? When it's already something that we're focused on as an agency, we, again, as a board, with Commissioner Wilson also overseeing and providing some of that recommendation for us as well, with the team, et cetera. So it just doesn't seem relevant to current.
Agreed. I think the new statute actually went a long way to, at least in my mind, clarifying this. So that's a good thing. So I'm of a mind right now to reconsider and rescind. Is there a homework assignment, Commissioner Wilson, that you had in this?
I've been looking at this for a couple of days. I hate making up language on the fly. It'd be something around the lines of, maybe we should just rescind. I think we made a statement.
We have, and with you running this track, or
I think we made a statement.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
priority for this.
Yeah.
For this body. I'd be fine with just rescinding it.
In my added comments that is, I think everyone should hold us and each other to the expectation that we will remain very focused, right? We will be working with leadership across the agency and being well informed. That is an expectation that people have of us, right? Public, internal, the governor, so, right? So we need to ensure that we will be following through and working with all of our, with every member of the team to ensure that we're always improving and doing this work together. So I think that just like setting that expectation where there's a lot of movement happening already and we are continuing, very committed to that work.
Mr. Can I just say one more
Yes.
thing? And this is actually isn't necessarily to this room, but to those still watching. I know that the independent testing labs that this is all about, that's been a hot button issue in the industry. So I just want them to be clear. Please reach out to me. We're going to be moving on, improving the independent testing lab process very quickly. You already see that this potency testing and the labeling, that's actually part of that. We want to make sure that consumers are getting the thing that they're paying for, that they're knowing what they're buying, and this all feeds into that. So this motion being rescinded is not a backtrack on that initiative. And I want people to truly understand that.
That well said, and it feels more to me like a refocus under the new statute, under the new commission. But definitely we will have a focus on this. So, okay, with that said, General Counsel, would you like to give me some words in the chat?
Worth coming. That's the first part.
So first, motion to reconsider the previously approved motion dated April 16, 2026 regarding establishment of a permanent testing task force. We have a motion.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call. Commissioner Delaware.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Chair, aye. So moved.
Second part.
We're moving fast for you, GC.
Go ahead.
Okay. We have a motion to rescind the previously approved motion dated April 16, 2026 regarding establishment of a permanent testing task force. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
and roll call. Commissioner Delaware.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
And Chair, aye. So moved. All right. Thank you. There was only one other that stood out to me, and then again, we'll circle back if the commissioners had others they'd like to discuss. But it was also from April 16th, and I'll read it into the record. The commission approved the motion pursuant to its authority. I'm not going to read all the numbers. You can see it in the record. And based on its assessment of current market conditions and the need to support a stable and sustainable regulated marijuana market, shall temporarily suspend the acceptance of indoor and/or outdoor marijuana cultivator license applications effective June 16, 2026. This suspension shall not apply to applications already being complete as of June 16th, which shall continue to be processed in accordance with law. This suspension shall not apply to micro-business license applications submitted by eligible social equity program or SEP participants or economic empowerment applicants, EEA, as defined by law, nor to the cultivator operators conducted pursuant to such micro-business licenses. This temporary suspension of acceptance of marijuana cultivator license applications shall remain in effect for 120 days, after which time the suspension shall terminate if not further extended. Public communication and administrative order shall apply solely to adult use regulations under law, and shall not be applicable to medical use regulations under 935 CMR 501. Okay, so this one stood out to me, and again, 3 weeks and a day coming in, like a lot of this. Remember the fifth thing I talked about in seats, which is sustainability. This one spoke to me in sustainability. Now, is it the right thing, the wrong thing, et cetera, to do a pause at this point? I am going to give credit that the former commission did the research, understood what was happening. So how should we rescind something that's supposed to go into effect next week, which of course we can do, it's all right. But what I was thinking on this was, there are issues out there. There are businesses that are struggling across the whole supply chain. What this, I believe, did would give us an opportunity for staff, because I do have a homework assignment on this one, to go away and find information around other jurisdictions. Have they done pauses? Have they done caps? Has it worked well? Has it had the desired effect? Because honestly, in this motion, I don't know what was the desired effect. It was kind of like throwing it in there. So understanding what the desired effect would be, has it been successful in other jurisdictions? What data do we have to support a move like this, which is a big move? And by the way, we're talking about cultivators. Well, does that at some point extend to other licenses as well? All good, robust conversation to understand the sustainability of our market here in the Commonwealth. So that was my thinking, without other input at this point, I'd probably be in favor of, sure, let it go into place, but we need a report back, say 90 days, giving us more data that shows what are the impacts that we believe a pause or a cap may have, and do we have data to support that from other jurisdictions? I'd really love to understand that. So with that, I'll throw it open for your thoughts, commissioners. Start with Commissioner Dillon. Commissioner Dillon.
I have a lot. There's a lot that I thought of.
There's a lot in this.
There's a lot in this.
Agreed.
And quite frankly, I think for me, the first thing is I don't have enough information to confidently move forward with a freeze. And I say this because, there's, from what it sounds like, unless there's a report or anything that we haven't seen yet, there hasn't been, like a thorough audit, not in like a financial audit, but like an assessment, right, evaluation, that was used to make this, to come to this conclusion, with the exception of anecdotal feedback, which also brings a lot of value. So I have concern about that, just the type of input of information that led to this. Perhaps some context on just why, the carve out was also just threw up a question mark for me. Micro business license, specifically, our social equity program applicant, it's just a very small population. It's just interesting the way this was presented. Again, and I just don't feel they have enough information for that. The other thing is, so I currently stand on of wanting to reconsider and rescind this motion. I don't think a freeze is currently necessary right now without the proper due diligence of doing some research. Where are we now? So many years into the industry. We're about to expand yet again in a substantial way. We do need to have some type of assessment formally to just do a comparative analysis with our peer markets. We should be looking into that. So again, we can remain innovative, we can remain competitive. We have to sustain that level of competitive advantage in this market while also keeping in mind equitable representation, right? So, I talked about data earlier, and I think this number might be a little bit off, but I was going into some of our public data sets. And right now, around approximately authorized to commence, only like 7%, maybe up to 8% of social equity participants and disadvantaged business enterprises are only about 11% of that, and that includes our veterans, women-owned, LGBTQ-owned, people of color, minorities specifically in those categories, and only 4% of our economic empowerment program. So it's such a small number. I worry about a freeze stalling any type of movement forward, mainly for more specifically for historically marginalized populations. And if there is a freeze, if we do decide on a freeze, I would be in favor of a complete carve out for social equity applicants. I know that there's a risk to that. I'm sure legal will share what those risks could be, just given the nature of where we are on a federal level. But that's something that I personally would be, I'm willing to stand on it and go in that way. But that's, I think, a different topic or a different conversation that's still attached to this. But for this particular motion, there isn't enough information for me to justify saying, yes, we need a freeze, or that it's such a substantial problem with just anecdotal feedback that I have not received directly, or that this board, as an official governing entity in this chapter of its iteration, has received formally.
And before Commissioner Wilson weighs in, I'd love to get a reaction because we did say one very similar thing there, which was data. What drove this, or was it pure anecdotal? I mean, was there any information that was taken into consideration, or again, commissioners on the road bumping into businesses? Wow, there's too much product. There's too much. Well, okay, that's fine. That gives you a path to pursue as a hypothesis. But
Right.
What was the data?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of the data specifically that was discussed in this context is strictly price compression. And so a lot of that was driving the discussion. We did hold, the former chair posted and held a listening session on the licensing freeze. The feedback generally against the freeze was, if you're going to do it, have an equity carve out, which ended up in the final motion. What the staff did in preparation, understanding that the commissioners were looking to discuss the licensing freeze in that situation, was put together what we can pull in terms of data that we would track in a licensing free scenario. And that is actually in the packet from April 19th. I just put the link in the chat. It's on page 89 of the packet from April 19th. And so that is not necessarily the data that was used to make the final decision. That was us as staff determining or notifying commissioners in a freeze scenario. This is what we would be able to track for a future decision on, was the freeze ultimately successful? And so that data is summarized of what we will be able to pull on a consistent basis from the beginning of the freeze. And so put into categories of supply demand, equilibrium metrics, pricing, economic health, operational utilization, business viability and attrition, inventory velocity. So some of that information would come out of our existing platforms, and we would be tracking that as we move forward, if the license increases to go into effect based on the previous motion or any determination you make here today. I would note, though, as you mentioned, what you will probably be coming with a homework assignment if this moves forward, is there is very little,
Or even if it doesn't.
and even if it doesn't, we can track whatever you like regardless. Well, what we're able to pull out of metric and other platforms, which we've highlighted here. There is very little chance that we would see any movement that we would be able to definitively tell you within 120 days because of a number of things. One, within the motion is the carve out, so we will still have applicants coming in. But also, this is a look forward motion as previously written. Therefore, we have a relatively long queue of folks who are in the process of becoming licensed for cultivation. So,
But it does say if the application was not complete by the 16th.
Correct.
So it would only be those. Yeah.
and I don't have, and we could poll it if that's of interest today, but ultimately that list of folks that are in the queue and do have complete applications is not insignificant.
Okay.
And so within 120 days, we will continue to see folks progress that were already in the queue, and we'll see folks that in the carve out may come forward and get complete applications and be ready to go. That's not to say that there is not an impact, but only to say that the data that we would track in 120 days is most likely not going to definitively give you the opportunity to say this is being successful or not successful in that period of time.
Understood. What we would get reported there, I think, is outside of our jurisdiction. Have others done this? What have they seen? Has it had an impact? If so, what, what
Absolutely.
unintended consequences? I don't know.
And to that effect, certainly our partners through other jurisdictions and from Canada, our government affairs team could put together a summary of other jurisdictions that have done licensing freezes and what they've found in a 90-day period. That's perfectly fine. We'd be able to come back to you to give you that context within a period of time, whether you move forward with the freeze or not. We'll be able to accomplish it.
Thank you very much. A good point of view on this, given your background in history too.
Yeah, it's anything more for us, because I think we're all coming to it in different points of
Yeah.
view. So I'll just sort of state the outset. Broadly, I'm in favor of a pause, freeze, whatever we want to call it. There are some things in here that I do think are complicating. We've got now the deverticalization for medical marijuana, which now that I'm rereading this, I think adds some complications here. However, just looking through the packet that we got today, again, this only applies to cultivators. And I was just doing some, back of the envelope math. We've got about over 50% of our cultivators are micro level tier 1 or tier 2 licenses. They've only got licensed canopy up to, that's less than 50% of the total licensed canopy. On the flip side, our tier 10 and 11 licensees, there's about 17% of the cultivator licenses. They've got about 30% of licensed cannabis. So there's a big distinction between our larger operators and our smaller ones. And I think I'm actually also in favor of keeping the carve out for the social equity group. And I don't know this, the data doesn't say it, or I can't hold my finger on it, but I'm thinking they're probably on the smaller end of the scale. And this might allow them to get more of that sort of canopy share. And I was actually just at a cultivator that just opened, maybe a week or two ago. They're using less than half of their facility, to grow cannabis. So, I'm in favor of the freeze. I agree that 120-day pause is probably not gonna be a lot of movement, but I think that moves the industry in the right direction. And, I'm particularly interested in how it may allow your smaller, perhaps social equity applicants to get a further toehold when they've got such a small share of that market. So, again, always defer to the board. I'm going to be collegial with my colleagues, but so that's my position right now. Commissioner.
Appreciate the different perspectives. So it was interesting when I find myself becoming softer on the decision. That's where I'm at right now.
By the way, I am absolutely on the fence. The one thing I'm resolute on though is the data. We need more and better data, whether we have a pause or don't have a pause. We do know we have issues in sustainability, and that I recognize, and that's probably why I was coming out of the gate saying, okay, maybe this makes sense, but I was also relying on the former board had to have done their homework. But I don't know, I don't know if there was a ton of homework done. There was some listening sessions, some other stuff, so I don't know. But anyway, I interrupt you.
I definitely agree on what I say on the data piece. Maybe, offline, maybe think about like dashboards and stuff like that. We can automatically update it and all that, just so we can current, but it's a different conversation. So Commissioner Wilson, interesting. Yes, I definitely hear what you're saying. If we move forward with this freeze, one of my follow-up to the comments already made is supporting our social equity cultivators. If we really want to try to make this freeze achieve some type of positive outcome, where one, we can assess in a way that, in a more controlled environment from a research perspective, right? It allows us that environment. I see that as a positive. And I'm just, thinking operationally, like resources that need to be allocated to this, that's additional tasks that need to be allocated. So just being mindful of that, just think about that from a managerial perspective. So there's that piece. And I do like of having a controlled research environment where we can assess as much as possible. And then the second piece to this, right now, from my understanding, a lot of our social equity programming is very much pre-licensure, right? And we do need that programming in, let's call it just business development, technical assistance that stretches into the life cycle of a licensee who's already operating, those who are, ready to begin operations. That level of business development intervention for social equity applicants, or, DBEs, like literally from historically marginalized communities, need to be very much part of our DNA, because that is where we can really move the needle in helping a business owner understand the literal operations of how to run a business. And I think if we want this to be intentional, like we need to provide some support to those applicants, because otherwise we're just freezing and leaving people onto their own.
Unpack that for me. Like, what does that look like?
So that could look like, my previous experiences, there's a couple of successful strategies where you have, an entity, a technical assistant provider, or a large enterprise that helps a small business understand the tools that they need. So they learn, so not only are they learning from a pre perspective, right? They're taking these tools, adding them to their toolkit so that they understand their bookkeeping. They understand their HR policies that need to happen. They understand now and add, and those are regular business
Can I
things.
stop you for a second? Would
Yeah.
that be us, or is that economic development
That could be, I would say,
as the
Based-
regulator?
right, as the way that we're currently structured, that would definitely be an EOED initiative that we could collaborate in?
We could collaborate in. I get
Because,
that.
because we could
Yeah.
regulate it in the sense where that is an expectation.
Yeah.
Right, we can add verbiage that creates these pathways
Right.
of tools that, or resources that are needed to invest in that.
Yeah.
That would then activate some of our other partners in this case, it would be OED.
Yeah.
And because that is what is needed, right? From any small business development perspective, the number one issue is access to capital, which we already know in the industry is like super restricted. And that's, the future is exciting because we'll see how things throw out and, it's a moment of innovation for us. And then two is the literal functionality of standing up any small business. And in other cases, so in other situations, there's been strategies where an entity was just, big enterprise A, right, company A, they're able to support in providing wraparound services on accounting, on HR, on, how to grant write, how to access the capital stack. And the companies that need this the most are typically historically marginalized communities, people that have not come from capital or don't have any type of generational wealth, they don't have access to venture capitalists, they don't earn capital funding. So that level of knowledge is critical in order to be successful.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I agree. And where I was going was, it's so interesting that we'll get to know each other better. And for everyone that knows online, we're not allowed to talk to each other offline, so we don't, other than you having a good day. Thank you, open meeting laws, which is for the right reason. But we'll learn about each other and our philosophies. And I guess at my core, I'm kind of a free market person. But I know in this particular instance, there's a reason we have this agency in an industry that is in its early stages, and that we need to have, you said bumpers and maybe guardrails, et cetera. And the role of economic development, I think, is to help them actually run their business, if you will, and support them. Where ours is to put some of those guardrails in place and do what we can from a regulatory standpoint to be supportive of business, absolutely. But also I go back to my sustainable, so, okay. But the big piece we're missing still is the data and executive director, if you have a question.
Yeah, let me just add one other
Yeah.
kind of long discussion the board had on the data side of it,
Yeah.
because certainly there was a lot of qualitative here, right? It was feedback from the industry on continuing to license while there was price compression.
Yeah.
Price compression is certainly tracked, and the data there is, it can be compared with other jurisdictions and was somewhat,
Yeah.
noted that it was coming based on experiences of jurisdictions that have legalized before us, but is ultimately something that is a concern in the industry.
Yeah.
The other major point is one that Commissioner Wilson sort of ran through on a high level as well, which is the canopy for cultivation, which we track by tiers and is in those monthly reports that you receive and is broken down in a variety of different ways. And so ultimately, one of the major discussions from the former commissioners leading into the discussion was, we have a significant amount of canopy. The canopy is not exact because you're in a tier, which means you can go up to this amount. You can go down to this amount. The discussions also took place over the course of a year on tier relegation, which is a topic assigned to Commissioner Wilson. And so we're working on as well. It's another element here, but a lot of the data specifically that was reviewed was, do we need more?
Yeah.
Do we need more canopy when the production is one element of what the price compression that we're seeing? So I just want to make that clear. I think a lot of what we put forward in terms of the data that we can track over time to say, if this is a policy decision being made and the effort is to address price compression, which again is a policy decision for it, that is something that is ultimately what you feel you want to wade into, that it is right now a lot of what was discussed on the basis before and after the listening session was looking at the overall canopy. Is it too much, generally speaking, and therefore let's pause and let's evaluate while we determine if there is a desirable outcome that you have as policymakers. So I just wanted to note that there was a lot of data discussions. I think to Commissioner De Lobato's point, we can take what we've put forward to say this will track over time, and we can make those visualizations and all those things for you to have. My only point was not that we shouldn't do that or that you should decide one way or the other on the freeze. It's simply to say that after 120 days, you're not going to be able
No.
to say, all right, now we know. It's just because of all of those other factors, how many people are already in the pipeline, that 120 days will give you, it is more of a pause than a freeze. And I think that was the only intent. I just want to clarify.
Question.
Yep.
All right, so there's another follow-up question now, adding social consumption to this. What is and maybe this is too premature to ask right now, but what is the risk of a freeze with cultivators with social consumption coming online soon?
Mr. Chairman, we can try to address that question. I think ultimately, given what we see as the rollout with a relatively organic pilot group of municipalities that seem ready to be the first ones out of the gate between the 5 to 10 range that we would see based on our outreach over the last 2 years. I don't know that the demand created through social consumption will seriously outweigh what the previous commissioners were looking at in terms of production. And so I think over time that may be the case. I think in the short term, I don't know that will factor in to kind of the immediate supply demand issues that I think the previous commissioners had looked at in terms of saying the increase in canopy and production compared to the demand. And what is interesting and what our data demonstrates and we have made sure that people are up to date on is the overall revenue within the industry has continued to increase. The demand from the public has increased, but the production has also increased. And that was what the commissioners were looking at in terms of the canopy to say the market from a pure bottom line perspective is healthy. The demand continues to be there. People are enjoying new products, and the 2-ounce limit has been utilized since the governor signed the bill. But the price is still comparatively low to previous. And that is because the production has also kept up. So ultimately, again, it's part of your discussion will be whether or not you want to be tipping scales on the supply and demand element, but that is certainly part of it. And so I think to your question, new ways in which revenue will be generated and demand will be created through social consumption. We will see, but we will not see it immediately either because of the rollout and the way that communities choose to opt in. And so I think that will probably be a conversation that we'll need to track over, probably the next couple of years.
And I say that because maybe this is too future, thinking too much in the future, but one, with the timeline, social consumption, will we find ourselves in a situation where the demand is much higher in a year and a half, let's throw that number out there, right? A year and a half from now. And then we are delayed because we've frozen the supply side. And now we're playing catch up. And then I'm just kind of scenario planning in my head about that. So, yeah.
Commissioner?
Yeah, to hear if I can just, and not sort of directly follow up on that because none of us can predict the future. But and I would love for staff to correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that over the past 5 years, the price of flower, that is the sort of unprocessed cannabis taken right off the grown and harvested, has fallen more than 50%. I think somewhere around 80%, somewhere around there. I don't know if my numbers are right or wrong or they're
Accurate.
General.
By the way, is that what's been seen around the country as well, other jurisdictions?
I'm going to say yes, but also caveat that by again saying you see vastly different outcomes on price compression from a Michigan with no caps and an Illinois with very strict caps. And so those are some of those policy items that we'll look at as well when we give you the side by side of other jurisdiction.
So, that balances against, I hear what you're saying about the social consumption may further accelerate that, the use of the product or the market of the product. But just knowing that trajectory, I guess I'm a little bit less concerned about that. I think, the flip side is I visited a number of facilities. They are not operating at 100% capacity. I think there's I can't really think of any just off the top of my head, again, anecdotal, but, so,
They're not growing up to their license.
yeah, we were in a room.
Yeah.
That they could grow cannabis in, they're using cannabis.
Okay.
But the majority of both of them,
Did you ask why?
because the price doesn't support it,
Interesting.
the price does not support them, growing more of it. I'm sorry, I just wanted to close out with sort of one thought. If there had not been an exemption for social equity, I understand there are maybe some legal complications here. I'm hoping that there's some way we can maybe protect that group or protect that exemption in these freeze.
And they are in this. If I read it correctly, they are absolutely
Yeah,
protected.
then I maybe feel different about it, but I think long-term, the industry's going through a lot of dramatic changes, even at the federal level, which will affect our market. We may have to think more carefully about how many people we license and things of that nature going forward.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's a tough thing for people to hear, but I want to be honest that based on where people are in the market, you have to be very thoughtful about those types of things, not just anybody who walks in the door. So maybe that may be where we go.
Yeah.
So.
Fair enough. Commissioner, you know, something? I have a story if you want to think about that. And I've shared this with the executive director, I think yesterday. It's really interesting. We all do various things in our journeys and in our lives. And about 25 years ago, my brother wanted to open a restaurant. And so I was his financial partner in that venture. One of the things, and I grew up outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania. It was 15, 20 miles outside of Scranton in a very rural community. And the licensure at the time, liquor licenses were within a county, but they were specific to a town. Okay. So when we bought that liquor license, it was $5, $6, $7 grand. 2 years later, they opened it up that license could be used anywhere in the county. That license went from being worth $6, $7 grand to 50 grand overnight because of the nature of how they allowed them to be portable, caps that were imposed. Because in the past, downtown Scranton had a cap, and all of a sudden now you could take this license from 15 miles out and move it downtown, made it a lot more valuable. That was my first experience 25 years ago with something, around, do you put a cap? How many do you have? Are they portable? And we haven't talked about any of that yet, what can it be used, and going across the Commonwealth, et cetera. But that was an interesting experience, kind of living through that with my brother and his restaurant at the time. But did you have any other thoughts? Actually,
I was just thinking, hearing from Commissioner Wilson and just anecdotally, right, like where some cultivators aren't using their license at 100% capacity. This just my economics for anyone, online, and my background is in economic development and really thinking outside of the box in various industries and how we can grow from an innovative perspective, always keeping, right, like the social lens at the corporate center of decision making. So this is probably out as a friend to our legislators and all of our other departments. I'm curious, and this is not for now, but just thinking in the future, is there a way that we can recommend or research on ways for cultivators to innovatively use any other space to both support the industry, to add to revenue generation, and thinking, from upcycling products that perhaps didn't, make it into a product, into a finalized product, upcycling, clean energy, all of that kind of bundles in. So I think there has to be an innovative approach. There always is another pathway that we can look at to help operationalize 100%. I think we need to be thinking about that from a future perspective, from a technological perspective, from a consumer perspective, and from when we're thinking about industry as a whole and the versatility of cannabis. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. We're just scratching the surface right now and what we're involved in and what we're regulating. And I think I don't want to open up a can of worms. I'm just going to say I'll keep it there. But just thinking out loud.
Yeah. No, and all good thoughts. I am going to bring us to a point. I'm going to throw something out and see if we're at a point for a motion, but we could either have a motion and either rescind or amend. We could do nothing. We could be silent on it. It goes into effect next week. as the prior commission had put into place. As I mentioned, I'm kind of on the fence, but right now, if I were to put forth a motion, I would say motion to let it go through as constructed with the social equity carve-outs, with the homework assignment. So we get more data and then we can make a better decision, I think, and if we, we can work with staff, but 90 days seems reasonable. That'd be 30 days before that 4 months expired. That's kind of where I'm thinking right now, but sounds like you're of a similar mindset right now.
I'd be amenable for that.
Okay. And I know you were leaning the other way. No,
It was.
see, you're talking like me, more the free market. Just let it go. Michigan. And when you're done, we'll go to GC.
Yeah, I think, a comparative analysis, a comparative market analysis, high level would be really helpful.
Really?
And I don't call it homework just because I don't want to feel like a student, so.
But see, that's an assignment, former consultant, that's an assignment I would need. Pulling that information together, trying to compare markets, which.
Mr. Chair, it's always easier to give out the homework.
Well, but when you get this much white hair, okay, it's because, I'm on the back nine-ish. So we get to give out more assignments than we take at this point, right?
So I do think comparative analysis would be really helpful. I think for all of us, it can tell us a lot about what to expect. And, we have to remain this level of, to keep this level of competitiveness in first, as pioneers in this work. So it's only going to add to the work that we do. It'll inform a lot of the things that we move forward with. My second, so that's what I would support that with that expectation, and happy to collaborate in any way, like put me to work too. I can go do some research, right? So
I second that.
I think we all really appreciate good data and we'll appreciate diving into it too. So let us be thought partners with you in that. And then the second thing is I would really like to see how within our scope, right? I want to overstep programmatically with some of our other colleagues in other divisions outside of the commission, but how we can use the expertise of our social equity team to support our cultivators, our carve-out, our applicants, our social equity cultivators. I would like to look into that to see if there's anything that, like, what is prohibited, what is prohibiting us to, or what are some of the barriers right now based on how we're currently regulated or how everything's structured that would, let me rephrase that. What are the access points that we have within the bounds of our current structure that our teams can support cultivators without going into this, without pulling too much programmatic language into it? That makes sense. And so how can a social equity team be a tool of resource for any of our applicants in the queue? And perhaps, I think right now, correct me if I'm wrong, there's only one social equity cultivator is operational.
I would have to confirm that.
Okay, I think it's a very low number. It's a small number. But actually that doesn't, I don't want to digress this to another conversation, but I think we need to look into that. There's certain social equity applicants or even owners of color, Black and Latino owners who are not social equity applicants. Right, so there's that. There's on how we can best support our operators and our licensees. But so I'm interested to know how within the structure that we currently have, without stepping into any type of programmatic services, right? So we don't necessarily do that. Is there a way that we can be a resource, even if it's informative, pulling technical assistance into an operational setting versus just licensure? And maybe it's just technical assistance in that way that allows us to be very intentional with that support. And I think about this as a way that we can create a much more permanent strategy. Like this should be something that we do all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, and I'm very much of that belief when it comes to any type of intentional social equity, you know, inclusive work, like it should just be how we operate, how we show up. It really shouldn't be this group or that group. It's like, that's how we should run the organization.
And this could be a great test case for us.
Right, so if we can, I'm really interested to make sure, like, we're not in a weird gray area, you
Yeah.
know, where being violating something.
So,
Yeah, just one other thing, I know we're moving towards a vote, but I just want to commend us as like this. It is, I think it's good that we came to this kind of split and we're sort of honing in on the right thing. It is probably one of the meatier decisions we made today. It's gonna have a lot of downstream effects on a variety of different communities, different operators differently. So I think it's really good that we all have different perspectives and we can sort of eat around that apple fully. So I think this was great, and whether we had a little bit of division, and we could sort of hone in on something that works.
and, you know, I'll underscore that. We are all here. We didn't know each other 3 weeks ago. And we're all here for different reasons, but the governor wanted us to be in these roles. And it's not to just rubber stamp things and, you know, get along. It's about getting to the right decision, having a constructive debate as opposed to just a debate for debate's sake. So anyway, no, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you. Now, general counsel, he's saying, how do I memorialize that? Whoa.
We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
We'll have to go spend that, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation.
Yeah.
But I do want to just offer a minor correction in what is in the public packet and what was shown you previously, as has been brought to my attention. In the prior motion language.
Yep.
It reads, this suspension shall not apply to applications already deemed complete as of June 16th, 2026. The actual language that was approved by the fire board is this suspension shall not apply to applications already submitted to the commission as of June 16th.
So that's, okay, so it wasn't completed as I had read it. It is submitted by. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that was
Yep.
clear for everybody and
Clear.
not that it impacts the.
Actually, that's a kinder, gentler approach anyway, so there's fine with that, but okay. So with that, general counsel, I am thinking of putting forth a motion to the effect of reconsider with an amendment to report back in 90 days with the elements we've talked about of data from other jurisdictions, with social equity as the key consideration. What else did I miss, folks?
I think that's it, just the comparative
Yeah, I
analysis.
think that was it.
Yeah.
Those are the two key things.
Apologies, my memory's not working that one.
That's okay. No, we're 3 hours and 17 minutes in, so. I get it. My mercy rule comes into effect shortly. Okay, this is important.
Levels here, I did just pop in the chat here the first part of that. And then on the rest of it.
Mr. Chairman, while we're
Yes.
getting to a motion, just gauging the interest, we have obviously some staff reports and an ED report that we've tabled. Your desire to have those done today, should we table them?
So I would say if you have anything that you believe is time sensitive or urgent, that you want to hit on today, I think we can make time for that. Otherwise, I know we have a meeting for next week, which is going to be focused on these emergency regs, which should go quickly, I believe. And we could add some topics in there if you feel it appropriate then. Great. For everyone's record, my goal, and somewhat uninformed, this is being our second meeting, I don't know why these meetings need to necessarily go more than 3 hours. I'm kind of thinking that if we do our homework in advance, staff prepares us, then we just have a nice, healthy conversation, constructive debate around these key topics with having done our homework. So given that we're at almost 3:20 right now, yeah, I'd prefer, unless you have urgent business, we could add stuff to next week's, because we know we're gonna have one on the 17th. But if there's anything you want to bring up today, by all means. Okay, so GC, waiting for your words. I can do the first one, I think, anyway. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was it.
Do we have a motion to reconsider the motion of April 16, 2026 around the pause? I'm just gonna say that generally unless you feel we have to get more.
That's in there.
Oh, I didn't see it.
So,
Oh, there it is. Okay. Motion to reconsider the previously approved motion dated April 16th regarding a temporary licensing freeze involving indoor and outdoor marijuana cultivators. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Roll call. Commissioner Dillabaugh.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
And Chair, aye. And then the next will be, I believe, motion to amend.
Yep.
You got it, no worries. I know, put you on the spot.
I appreciate seeing Sally, so I think it's okay. For all of us, take a minute.
Amen.
I just threw another,
Okay.
threw that in there for your consideration.
Read it first. Okay.
I should add, if you wanted a time element in there, we can add within 90 days.
So can I ask, is 90 days reasonable for staff? I don't want to, I know you had a lot of stuff that was in here for like 60 days, 30 days, and you had in a conga line of them. Does 90 days feel reasonable on your end? It feels like on our end, because that'd be 30 days in advance of it expiring. So we can make a decision on it ends, it extends, or whatever.
I'd confirm with the government affairs, even 90 days will be perfectly sufficient.
All right, good. Okay, so, yeah. So do we have a motion to amend the previously approved motion dated April 16, 2026 regarding temporary licensing freeze involving indoor and outdoor marijuana cultivators to allow the licensing freeze to go into effect, subject to the additional requirement that staff gather and provide data from other jurisdictions around similar licensing freezes and their effect on equity applicants and licensees within 90 days. We have a motion.
So,
Second?
Second.
And roll call, Commissioner Dillabaugh,
I,
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Chair, aye, so moved. All right, there we go. Now, whew, that was good. Those were the 5 that stood out to me. As far as some of those over 2 months, a lot of motions were made. Are there other motions that either commissioner would like to discuss or consider? The other ones for me, we're just gonna let them roll and they're in the record.
You covered all the ones I would brought up.
Okay,
let's say,
wonderful. Well, based on the mercy rule, actually, we are at the end, but I will ask the executive director, is there anything else that you would like to cover today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in the interest of kind of directing folks to where this information is, I'll note the ones that can easily be moved to next week and will make more sense. So if we could go to the executive director's slides. I just want to point out to folks in the public that these are available in the public facing material, should anybody have interest in it. We go to slide 1, the next slide, excuse me, for Equity Works. This is the data that I had mentioned last week on the engagement in the job fair for Equity Works Career Hub. Kudos to Director Williams and the EPCO team, as well as other participants, for pulling that off. And I think that that is going to be the start of a lot more engagement through Equity Works. So thank you for that. If we go to the next slide thereafter, a lot of interest from the previous board, your predecessors here on receiverships. Just want to note, we did put out a bulletin on those pre-approved receivers, pre-qualified, and a lot of information as well on folks who may be, and receiver is actually more of the lesser known, or the more common term that we use, but court appointees is the official term. And so how to become pre-approved and how that whole process works, we now have on the website, and we're continuing to build out more. Number 3 and 4, we're actually going to skip those THC potency, inflation bulletin, and assessment fines. EC and first assistant EC will be with you next week for other items, and we can tie that in. If we could go thereafter, and I apologize to the folks working the slides, I know you got to go through quite a bit here. But for public information, we do have the first set of municipalities who have requested 2-year waivers on delivery. Thank you. That was very skipped right to it. And this is general information on it, but if you go to the next slide, this is the actual data that I think people will find interesting out there in the public. So these are the municipalities that have filed. We are basically verifying certain level of information that it's in order. After 2 years, those will have to come to the commissioners and they will not be simply verified. They will be a decision for the commissioners at that time. One interesting note I will make is that one of these municipalities, rather than a 2-year waiver, has requested a 1-year waiver. So we'll see if that becomes a little bit more of a trend. Obviously, one of the major things that people need to understand about this is that if you are a yes community on retail, you do not, under the new statute, have the ability to opt out on delivery. Whereas I worked for a municipality that was no on retail, but we opted in on delivery. So everybody makes their own decisions. This is the list. I do expect that it will grow and we will have this updated on the municipal zoning tracker. But again, these are 2-year waivers under the new statute. And we will make sure that our delivery operators are updated. But ultimately, again, one of the things that we've seen from past public safety data to the previous data conversation is that delivery eats into and seriously negates the illicit market. And that there is no real public safety data that was speaking against the delivery decisions that were made by previous boards. And in fact, that was one of the reasons in the data points that led the commissioners to go from the 2-driver rule to 1 driver for less than 5,000 in the car. So a lot of great data on this, and hopefully, we'll maintain a relatively small list would be my hope as a former municipal leader. If we go to the next slide, and we can do this on a monthly basis. I may have a different order. So social consumption, we will continue to have in our updates. And so I'm not going to go through that right now. But our project management team is coordinating through numerous different departments, and we will now be reading in Commissioner De Lobato as the sponsor on those and engaging with some external groups. So our project.
So going forward, we'll pick the right timing where we'll do more deep dive on social consumption after Commissioner De Lobato has her legs under.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you go to the next slide, there's just a couple hidden here that generally will show where we are in the process, right? And so we'll continue to update this, and our project management team will continue to coordinate on that. The slide that I to before this is a data update that I just want to flag because it is of note to people in the public on the host community municipal equity element of Chapter 180. And I apologize because you had that slide up and then I made you jump around here. So the thing I will flag here is that in comparison to when we first did this update in August of 2025, there has been substantial progress. However, comparatively to the number of jurisdictions with cannabis that will need to be in compliance with HCME, we have a ways to go. So I will work with Commissioner De Lobato as well, who is whereas Commissioner Wilson is the point person for HCAs, Commissioner De Lobato is the point person for HCME under Chapter 180. So I will work with Commissioner De Lobato on this and we'll come back through the chair as we progress on this. Finally, licensing data updates are in this packet. Happy to go through it if the board is interested, but just so you're aware, those are updates that are done every month, whereas HCME is tracked under the Director of Investigation staff. The licensing updates obviously are under the Director of Licensing. Those are important updates that we track on a monthly basis and can be tracked over time. Those include a lot of the data that we previously discussed, such as tier relegation. Again, up to the chair if you'd like. Any of those folks are here, but really just wanted to highlight for the public that all that data is in the reports and continue to be in the reports, whether we have the time to go through them each month. We will continue to track it for the public facing element. A lot of this data as well can be found through open data. These are a little bit more sometimes user friendly for people who don't want to pull the kind of raw data.
Got it.
And those are the general updates. We will move 2 of those to next week related to Enforcement Council. We'll be coming back to you on other topics as well. And if there are any questions on any of these, always obviously, reach out after the fact if you'd like to be discussed in public meeting through the chair. Always happy to do that.
Terrific. Thank you, Executive Director. I think we'll call it a day today, but before we wrap, I'll let the commissioner say any final thoughts. But from my perspective, again, great first meeting, team. I mean, this is our first full commission meeting, so well done. Look forward to working together going forward. And thank you, staff, everyone, seriously. Great work getting us prepared. We're all new. We're still going to be new for a while.
but appreciate all the support and everything you've done to help onboard us. And thank you for all those online. I've noticed not a lot of people have dropped, a lot of people out there, which is a good thing. So with that, Commissioner Dillabaugh, any final thoughts?
This was just echoing, great first meeting. Also, huge thank you to the staff. Again, stress enough, and we've said this throughout our time together this morning. The level of innovation and just brilliance that is here at the commission. And I feel very, very fortunate to be among both of you and the rest of the staff doing this incredible work. So thank you, staff. We have a lot of work ahead of us. And very excited though to have everyone lean in, super committed to the successes that we will see, that we will reach together. So just very eager to work with you on that, and thank you for good meeting today, both of you and everyone. Georgie Steve and Executive Director.
Commissioner Wilson.
No, I've been to a number of public meetings, it's been one of the better ones, so kudos to everyone around the table. If we look good, it's probably because we have really good people that you don't see that are smart and have facilitating these good discussions. So that's a backhand way of saying the staff's been great. So check it out, Mr. Chair.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
Second?
I know that. Second.
And all in favor, aye? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.